Chapter 1201. Creak, creak. The bed made unbearable noises. Lu Qingyi panted heavily, letting out soft, low moans. Whether on the bed, placed on the table, lying down, on top, or pressed against the glass, she no longer knew where she was. She only wanted to immerse herself in pleasure with the man before her forever. In the end, she could only lean weakly against Gu Junqing's embrace like a koala, her hands tightly wrapped around his shoulders, and her legs locked firmly around his waist. Her snow-white body trembled uncontrollably, and her throat emitted a cry resembling weeping and sobbing. Feeling Lu Qingyi's exhaustion, Gu Junqing did not continue. He kissed her smooth skin once and then released her. Only then did he have time to check the information sent by the system. Ding. Host has successfully captured the heroine Lu Qingyi, plundering 500 points of protagonist luck from the Son of Destiny, Dao Tianyan, and increasing villain luck by 500 points. Ding. Host has made a major plot change by capturing the heroine Lu Qingyi, rewarding the host with 50,000 villain points. At the same time, Gu Junqing felt a surge of essence circulating through his body. This was Lu Qingyi's primordial essence. These 7 sisters had practiced a specific cultivation technique since childhood. Whoever plundered their primordial essence would gain immense benefits. Moreover, plundering this essence had little negative impact on the sisters themselves. If Dao Tianyan could obtain the primordial essence of all 7 sisters, his cultivation technique would successfully transform. He would even be able to step beyond the divine realm into the foundation establishment stage. Reaching this level, he could transcend nations and rule over an entire planet without any issue. Unless a nation possessed the determination to destroy all of humanity, nothing could stop him. However, this essence was not so easily plundered. Dao Tianyan knew that his 7th sister had been intimate with Gu Junqing, and their inseparable appearance clearly indicated it had happened more than once. The reason he was not worried about this essence being stolen by Gu Junqing was simple. He assumed Gu Junqing did not know about it and lacked the capability to take it. What Dao Tianyan did not know was that Gu Junqing had already plundered the essence of 4 of the 7 sisters. Furthermore, through the dual cultivation techniques of the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, he had successfully nourished and replenished the lost essence of the sisters. However, that refined essence was no longer the original essence obtained from practicing the 9 Heavens Yin spirit art. This created a misjudgment for Dao Tianyan. Although he harbored resentment regarding the intimacy between Gu Junqing and his 7th sister, he never directly risked his life fighting Gu Junqing. If he learned that his path to surpassing the divine realm had been completely blocked by Gu Junqing, he would truly fight him to the death regardless of the cost. After pondering these matters, Gu Junqing turned around and carried the drowsy Lu Qingyi to the bathroom for a mandarin duck bath, washing them both clean. Although her flawless body still stirred a lingering impulse, he chose not to continue exercising. He could already sense that the massive battle not far from the cruise ship had concluded. Furthermore, those 2 auras were gradually approaching the vessel. It seemed Dao Tianyan and the other person had finished fighting. Yet, the fact that they were approaching together left Gu Junqing somewhat puzzled. Thus, he simply dressed Lu Qingyi, kissed her flushed and tender cheeks, and walked out of the room to quietly await the arrival of Dao Tianyan and the other individual. Chapter 1202. Although the cruise ship was massive, its speed was not slow. Dao Tianyan and the Slaughter Emperor had been fighting for a long time, tangling with each other for several hours. Even for a powerhouse of the divine realm, catching up over this distance took several minutes. By this time, the sky was already growing faintly bright. Dao Tianyan and the Slaughter Emperor appeared leisurely as they stepped on the waves, chasing after the cruise ship. However, the 2 of them were actually extremely wary of each other. Sons of Destiny usually possessed a special kind of charm. Whether because of their own strength or their personal charisma, some villains would always look at them in a different light. Even if they started with opposing standpoints and mutual hostility, they would soon be attracted by the protagonist, follow them, or perhaps even be completely redeemed. Take Dao Tianyan and the Slaughter Emperor, for example. At this moment, the Slaughter Emperor also harbored thoughts of making peace with Dao Tianyan. He was already old, and even in the divine realm, his bodily functions would not decay, allowing him to maintain his peak. Yet, his lifespan could at most stretch for a little over 100 years. In reality, he was already over 100 years old now, leaving him with not much time left. If it were not for seeking revenge, he would never want to offend Dao Tianyan completely. The Azura King was a terrifying figure throughout the entire dark world. Moreover, he had just witnessed his strength firsthand. If Dao Tianyan had been in his initial state, he truly wouldn't have lasted long before this Azura King. Although he did not know why Dao Tianyan's strength seemed to have weakened considerably later on and his concentration had wavered, the young man was still not someone he could easily make an enemy of. If he truly offended him to the death, he would never know peace again. With this layer of consideration added, the Slaughter Emperor genuinely wanted to establish a good relationship with Dao Tianyan. After Dao Tianyan spoke to him, the desire in his heart to lean closer to the youth deepened even further. Senior, you must have suffered a severe injury in the past, one that hasn't fully healed even after all this time. Furthermore, in the dead of night, around 3 or 4 in the morning, your crown and heart experience needle-like piercing pains accompanied by full-body spasms lasting at least half an hour. Dao Tianyan glanced at the Slaughter Emperor beside him and said slowly. Upon hearing these words, the Slaughter Emperor could not help but be startled. How do you know? Are you investigating me? The Slaughter Emperor asked instinctively. Dao Tianyang's description was as precise as if he had seen it with his own eyes, and this could be considered his greatest secret. After all, if others found out that the Slaughter Emperor, who had dominated the top of the assassin rankings for decades, was now merely an elderly man plagued by illness and hard-to-heal injuries, his prestige would undoubtedly plummet. Even many of his past enemies might jump out to seek revenge against him. Thinking of this, the Slaughter Emperor instantly became vigilant, unconsciously distancing himself a little from Dao Tianyang. You don't need to worry. I haven't investigated you. I just figured this out by looking at you. Seeing the other person step back half a step and realizing he had misunderstood, Dao Tianyang waved his hand to explain. Figured it out? The Slaughter Emperor was stunned for a moment. That's right, because the person who injured you also possessed the ultimate Yang divine art, and he had no way to refine the inner qi that entered your body. Therefore, when yin and yang intersect at night, that inner qi reaches its peak strength. Your inner qi tends toward gentleness and softness, and this aggressive energy will quietly devour your gentle inner qi to grow. If this drags on for too long, you will silently drop dead without anyone knowing. Dao Tianyang's words made the Slaughter Emperor's hair stand on end. Since you understand it so well, do you have a way to fix it? The Slaughter Emperor could not help asking out loud. I have a way, but why should I tell you? Chapter 1203. I have a way, but why should I tell you? Dao Tianyang's words caused the Slaughter Emperor's eyes to flash slightly. He knew that Dao Tianyang wanted to negotiate terms with him. Right now, he and Dao Tianyang were only in a temporary truce, and the two could start fighting again at any moment. Under such circumstances, how could Dao Tianyang possibly tell him the cure? If the roles were reversed and Dao Tianyang had a problem, he might not even mention it at all. He might even clap and cheer instead. What do you want me to do? If you can cure me, I can let Lin Xue go. The grievances between me and your sister can be wiped clean, and I can even give you all my family assets. The Slaughter Emperor said in a deep voice, quietly following by Dao Tianyang's side while waiting for his decision. He knew his fate might be entirely in Dao Tianyang's hands. That dark inner force caused him endless pain. Otherwise, he would never have wanted to capture Lin Xue to threaten that god of war. That's right, the injuries on his body were left behind by that very god of war. Although he captured Lin Xue under the guise of revenge, his actual goal was to retaliate against that god of war. Or perhaps he intended to use Lin Xue to force the god of war into helping him dissolve the dark inner force. Otherwise, he would never risk his old life. Hearing this, Dao Tianyang spoke up. There are 3 ways to untangle the dark inner force within your body. The first is to find the person who inflicted it upon you, and the second is to dissipate all your martial arts. You might as well just tell me the third way. Neither of those 2 methods is possible. At my age, dissipating my martial arts would probably mean dying of old age right on the spot. As soon as he finished speaking, the Slaughter Emperor shook his head. The first method could be tried, with the premise that he could actually capture Lin Xue. However, this method was not necessarily safe. If the intelligence was wrong, and that god of war didn't care about Lin Xue, it would all be for nothing, and he might even be beaten to death by the god of war on the spot. The second method was even more impossible. At his age, if he hadn't stepped into the divine realm, he would have likely died of old age long ago. Dissipating his cultivation was no different from courting death. With his back to the Slaughter Emperor, Dao Tianyang smiled silently and spoke slowly. The third method is to use a third party's true qi to dissolve the true qi inside your body. Given your condition, if this can be achieved, you might even turn misfortune into a blessing and find an opportunity to advance further. Advance further? Are you telling the truth? The Slaughter Emperor's turbid eyes, which were usually filled with a lifeless gloom, suddenly burst with a startling, razor-sharp light. I the Azura King, never lie. Dao Tianyang said indifferently. I believe you. But what do you want me to do? Since you mentioned so much, whatever you want must not be easy. I can trade all my family assets for it. I have 2 gold mines in North Continent and properties all over the world, and I can hand all of them over to you. The Slaughter Emperor fell silent for a moment, still unable to resist the temptation of advancing further. He knew that what Dao Tianyang wanted him to do could not be simple, so using money to trade for it would naturally be the best option. Money for someone of his level was just a matter of saying a single word. Senior doesn't need to do that. I've always respected seniors like you, and I can even help you for free. How could I possibly want your wealth? Just as the Slaughter Emperor thought things were settled and wore a happy expression, Dao Tianyang changed his tone and said sincerely, however, the dark inner force in your body can only be dissolved using my true qi. Helping you will also damage my vitality, so there is indeed a task I need your help with. I promise that as long as you complete this task, I will help you untangle the dark inner force in your body. What task? Help me kill someone. Chapter 1204. Who do you want me to kill? The Slaughter Emperor asked in a deep voice. He was not surprised by this request and couldn't be bothered to ask for details. Countless people paid him to kill, and he wouldn't even fear assassinating a national leader. Unless it was the leader of a major superpower, he might think twice. But this time, for the sake of his own life, he would accept the job without hesitation even if it were a superpower's leader. Gu Junqing. Gu? The Slaughter Emperor's heart stirred slightly. Naturally, he didn't think anyone Dao Tianyang personally commissioned him to assassinate would be a nobody. Thus, he racked his brain trying to think of the entire world, especially who might bear the surname Gu in the Xia country. Could it be the Luoda Gu family, which has recently risen to fame across the entire world. The Slaughter Emperor was different from the Butcher. Although the Butcher had decent strength, his status fell far short of someone who had occupied the top spot on the assassin rankings for decades. Therefore, their views on the world's overall situation and trends were quite different. The Butcher only felt that although the Gu family had been riding a high wave lately, infiltrating their territory to gather some intelligence would be a piece of cake given his strength. But the Slaughter Emperor did not think so. He had never seen a commercial family expand its power so rapidly. In the past world, the influence of ancient martial families in the secular world was not as great as that of commercial families. Cultivating to a realm where one could ignore bullets was simply too hard. Only grandmasters could rely on their protective aura to withstand them. But the current situation was vastly different from a few years or decades ago. Spiritual energy between heaven and earth was becoming more and more active, and the number of people advancing to the grandmaster rank was growing. Unless heavy weaponry was used, there was no way to deal with these grandmasters. Consequently, martial arts forces were growing larger and larger. Their status was rising higher and higher as well. Ordinary commercial families were practically cash machines in front of those ancient martial arts powerhouses. Yet, just a few years ago, the Gu family seemed to be merely a business-oriented family, even though they were known as the head of Luodu's four major families. But looking across the entire world, such a family actually didn't amount to much. Yet, in just these few short years, the scale of their expansion was simply jaw-dropping. Take money, for instance. The Gu family acted as if they had dozens or hundreds of printing presses running at full throttle in their home, constantly churning out cash. No matter the industry or the country, as long as doors could be broken open with money, they poured it in madly. They deployed their presence worldwide across technology, culture, finance, and various other fields. It wasn't as if no one had sneaked in to investigate, trying to find the secret behind the Gu family's frantic expansion, or hoping to bring them down. After all, harboring wealth was a crime in itself. The Gu family, possessing vast sums of wealth, was a juicy piece of meat in the eyes of many wolves. However, the deepest secrets of the Gu family were known only to a few core individuals. Moreover, they were surrounded by large numbers of top experts for protection, leaving outsiders helpless against them. As for the Xia country, because of the marriage ties between the Xia family and the Gu family, no one dared to look for trouble with the Gu family either. The Slaughter Emperor was very familiar with the situation in the Xia country. Therefore, he locked onto the Gu family at the very first instance. I need intelligence. Knowing that his target was a member of the Gu family, the Slaughter Emperor felt no ripples in his heart. He dared to assassinate national leaders, so why would he fear a member of a single family? At this moment, the sun was just rising, and the surrounding quiet, terrifying sea had returned to a clear azure blue, with the silhouette of the cruise ship already visible in the distance. Dao Tianyan stared at the distant cruise ship, his eyes narrowing slightly with a flash of ruthlessness. He is right on this cruise ship. Chapter 1205. Hearing that his target was right on the cruise ship, a trace of joy flashed in the Slaughter Emperor's eyes. Originally, he had been considering how to make a trip to the Xia country, and how to escape from there after killing his target. Now that the target happened to be right here on the ship, helping Dao Tianyan eliminate Gu Junqing meant he would not only receive timely treatment, but could also flee directly by sea, saving him a lot of trouble. What is the target's strength like? The Slaughter Emperor asked cautiously after pondering for a moment. He did not believe the opponent would be a weakling. Otherwise, why wouldn't Dao Tianyan kill him himself? It was either because the opponent's strength was too formidable or because the significance behind killing him was different. I don't know, but he is definitely not weak, Dao Tianyan murmured, pondering for a moment before speaking slowly. I once probed him in secret, but he simply didn't take the bait, and I failed to gauge his true strength. As his voice trailed off, he noticed the Slaughter Emperor's troubled expression and offered reassurance. However, you don't need to worry. The reason my advantage was so large when we fought earlier is that you hadn't brought out your true skills. If you use assassination methods, even I would find it difficult to escape your strikes without injury. Upon hearing this, the Slaughter Emperor gave Dao Tianyan a deep look, mentally cursing the little fox. Naturally, he did not believe a single word coming out of Dao Tianyan's mouth. Everyone in the Dark World knew that the Azura King was the best at concealing himself. Several leaders of peak dark factions had been scammed by the person before him at some point. He still felt lingering fear when recalling the pressure he felt from Dao Tianyan at the start of their battle. He even felt that if he had been slightly careless, the young man would have killed him right then and there. With such strength, if he weren't truly helpless against the target, why would he need to hire someone else to do the dirty work? Given his own abilities, if the target weren't strong, there would be plenty of ways to quietly kill them off. Asking him to make a move now definitely meant there was a reason he didn't know about. However, he didn't care anymore. Whether it was the recovery of his hidden injuries or the temptation of advancing his cultivation further as Dao Tianyan promised, he had to complete this task. He was determined to kill the man named Gu Junqing. Seeing that the Slaughter Emperor had stopped talking and looked completely resolute, Dao Tianyan felt a sense of satisfaction. He knew these old fellows harbored a frantic obsession with breaking through to the next level. After all, they had lived for over 100 years. The closer they got to death, the more terrified they were of it. Avenging a brother was all absolute bullshit. If it weren't for curing his hidden injuries and allowing his stagnant cultivation to continue rising, the Slaughter Emperor would have to be insane to fight him to the death, and refused to leave. As for whether the Slaughter Emperor would turn on him and take revenge against him or his second sister after being cured, he wasn't worried either. The Slaughter Emperor was already old, and even if he advanced further, there was a limit to how far he could go. He was confident that even if the Slaughter Emperor recovered his full state, he could completely suppress him. Moreover, Gu Junqing was his primary enemy right now, the existence he wanted to eliminate the most. Gu Junqing, let's see how you survive this time. Dao Tianyan narrowed his eyes, a trace of gloom flashing across the depths of his gaze. Given the Slaughter Emperor's assassination capabilities, even he would lose a layer of skin if caught in a well-laid trap. He refused to believe Gu Junqing was stronger than him. He hated this person with a passion. Yet every time he saw him, he felt a sense of helplessness. His Azura society was suppressed by him, and his sisters were falling for him one by one, protecting him. With everything piled together, he had long wished to grind Gu Junqing to dust to vent the hatred in his heart. Chapter 1206. Meanwhile, inside Ji Hanyan and Lin Xue's room, Ji Hanyan seemed to sense something and suddenly opened her beautiful eyes. Seeing that Lin Xue sleeping beside her was completely safe, she let out a quiet sigh of relief. Then, moving with utmost care, she tiptoed out of the room and headed toward Gu Junqing's chambers. Ji Hanyan walked into Gu Junqing's room on her slender, graceful legs. The first thing she saw was Lu Qingyi's intimate apparel discarded lonely on the floor. One black silk stocking hung over a stool while the other was nowhere to be found, leaving the entire room in utter chaos. The soft, flat sofa was covered in wrinkled impressions, and two clear handprints were visible on the window pane, as if someone had just been pressed against it. Furthermore, several items on the table had been hastily knocked to the ground. Seeing this scene, even though Ji Hanyan was mentally prepared, she was still left speechless. Had this bastard and her third sister gone to war or something? Ji Hanyan hurried into the bedroom to find only a single figure sleeping under the covers in the corner of the bed. It was one thing for the other half of the mattress to be a messy ruin stained with wet patches, but the specks of virgin blood were glaringly eye-catching. One half for sleeping, the other half for messing around, right? And where was the man anyway? Ji Hanyan cursed that particular bastard frantically in her heart. The familiar breathing let her know that only her third sister was lying on the bed now. Yet that bastard Gu Junqing was nowhere to be found. Ji Hanyan felt a complex mix of emotions, knowing he wasn't the type to pull up his pants and deny everything. Gu Junqing definitely had his reasons for not being here right now. Therefore, she could only let out a slight sigh. Ji Hanyan stepped forward and gently pulled the thin quilt over Lu Qingyi. Lu Qingyi's snow-white neck and chest were covered in kiss marks and scratch marks, left behind mercilessly by a certain dog of a man. From this, it was easy to see just how intensely the two of them had fought last night. Ji Hanyan inwardly cursed Gu Junqing once more, thinking that the stinky man really worked her sister to the bone. I hope our decision is right. We couldn't have chosen the wrong person, could we? Ji Hanyan's cool and sexy voice echoed in the room, carrying a hint of confusion before turning firm. Fortunately, Gu Junqing still had some decency left in him. Aside from the ambiguous marks left on Lu Qingyi's body, she had at least been washed clean. Filled with tenderness, Ji Hanyan lightly stroked Lu Qingyi's flushed cheeks, tucked her in, and prepared to leave. However, the moment she stepped away, she hesitated, turned around, and took care of the crimson stain on the bedsheet. She also tidied up the room a bit. Given Lu Qingyi's personality, she would surely feel deeply ashamed and angry upon waking up to see the chaotic state of the room. Moreover, seeing that Gu Junqing wasn't by her side, she might harbor grievances against him, or even doubt whether he truly loved her. She understood her own younger sister very well. Her experiences from years ago had long made her despair of men. For Gu Junqing to make her feel this much better now was already an extremely difficult feat. She did not want her sister's first time to have any regrets. At the very least, she wanted Lu Qingyi to feel that Gu Junqing was sincere toward her. After finishing up, Ji Hanyan walked out of the room. For some reason, ever since waking up, she had a persistent sense of unease in her heart. Thinking it over and over, the only thing she could think of was Gu Junqing's safety, so she decided to go look for him and see where he had gone. Chapter 1207. On the topmost deck of the cruise ship, Gu Junqing's long robes fluttered in the sea breeze. His dark pupils were crystal clear as he stared into the distant darkness untouched by the morning light. His handsome face, resembling a celestial being and defying verbal description, was exceptionally cold. Standing here so early in the morning? What, was last night unpleasant? At that moment, a cool and sexy voice rang out behind Gu Junqing as Ji Hanyan spoke with a hint of sarcasm. She rarely experienced moments of such emotional agitation. However, her younger sister's appearance just now had truly dealt her a massive shock. Anyone unfamiliar with the man before them would think he was merely an immensely handsome youth. But anyone who knew him understood he was completely perverted inside and out. Imagining the absurd scene in their room, Ji Hanyan could practically picture just how crazy the two of them had been last night. Second sister, didn't you feel it? Gu Junqing did not answer Ji Hanyan's question, instead asking with a solemn expression as he stared into the distance. Feel what? Hearing this, Ji Hanyan was slightly stunned before casting a glare at Gu Junqing. She felt like Gu Junqing was making a dirty joke, as if asking her to experience how her sister felt. A storm is coming. Why are you looking at me like that? Gu Junqing stared at the dim sky in the distance and sighed. Then, he cast a strange look at Ji Hanyan, seemingly puzzled by her reaction. Ji Hanyan had never been rebuffed like this before, and was momentarily at a loss for words. After a brief pause, she lowered her voice and said it was nothing. Gu Junqing did not reply and continued staring motionless into the distance. What on earth is going on? Ji Hanyan had been prepared to accept Gu Junqing's mockery, but seeing that he was completely different from his usual self, she couldn't help asking out of confusion. There are two Foundation establishment, well, what you call divine realm powerhouses fighting in the distance. But they've stopped now, and their auras are getting closer and closer to us. Gu Junqing said slowly. The divine realm? Are you sure? Given Ji Hanyan's composure, she couldn't help freezing in place upon hearing Gu Junqing's words, then cried out in a somewhat sharp voice. The martial arts divine realm allows one to step through the void. This is an existence already capable of short-distance flight. In the eyes of ordinary people, what difference is there between such an existence and Superman? Even grandmaster powerhouses at the pinnacle of humanity are no different from mere ants before them. In the past, there weren't many such powerhouses across the entire world. Even she only knew that the top assassin on the rankings, the Slaughter Emperor, might be such an expert. Therefore, she had never attempted to challenge that position. But now Gu Junqing was telling her that two divine realm experts were rushing straight toward them from not far away. Thinking of this, Ji Hanyan solemnly shifted her gaze toward the direction Gu Junqing was looking, but she couldn't sense any aura at all. However, she seemed to see a sense of impending storm gathering in the distant dark canopy of heaven. She finally understood why Gu Junqing wasn't staying to accompany her third sister, but instead lingering here alone. He must have wanted to protect everyone. Thinking this, Ji Hanyan's eyes suddenly softened. Her anger at Gu Junqing for running around randomly vanished completely in an instant. Is it because of Lin Xue? What on earth is her background that she can attract two divine realm experts? And what should we do? Ji Hanyan looked at Gu Junqing with a bitter expression. Usually a woman of firm agency, she was somewhat lost at the moment, pouring out consecutive questions, as she wanted Gu Junqing to make a decision. Don't worry, if my guess is right, one of them is an old acquaintance of ours. Gu Junqing's lips curled slightly as he spoke with profound meaning. Chapter 1208. Acquaintance. Ji Hanyan didn't quite understand what Gu Junqing meant, but soon, she didn't have time to dwell on it. Even she noticed something was wrong with the direction Gu Junqing was staring at. She couldn't help but fix her gaze on the distance with a solemn expression. She fell silent for a moment. At this point, the sky was growing faintly bright. Tourists on the cruise ship were appearing one after another. Where did Sister Lu go? I just went to knock on her room door, and someone I've never seen before came out, saying she's young Master Gu's friend. Lu Qingyi's manager, Wan Yu, yawned as she asked the other female staff members. Several female employees gathered together like chattering birds, asking each other questions. However, none of them knew where Lu Qingyi had gone. Then let's go look for her. Wait, could Sister Lu be in young Master Gu's room? One of the makeup artists, Zhang Zhen, suddenly smiled slyly. That's actually quite possible. If it's true, what kind of positions do you think young Master Gu and Sister Lu used? The traditional ones or all sorts of weird ones? Hard to say. Judging by young Master Gu's physique, it's no wonder Sister Lu still hasn't woken up. Hearing this topic, the women couldn't help chuckling and exchanging mischievous smirks. Alright, let's go find her first. Everyone be careful and don't ruin Qingyi's public image, Wan Yu said helplessly. What's there to worry about? There's nothing wrong with us talking about it in private. Besides, outsiders can't come up here, and we're out on the ocean. Where would any paparazzi be? A female employee muttered discontentedly. You have to be careful with everything. Have you forgotten the cautionary tales in the entertainment industry? Remember the actor who got caught sneaking around on New Year's Eve? Or the star who cheated overseas? For a high-traffic star like Qingyi, she can't afford a single speck of dirt on her reputation out there, you understand. Wan Yu glared at the staff and said in a deep voice. Got it. Pressured by the manager, everyone quieted down for a moment, but it didn't last long. By the way, did any of you hear strange noises last night? I was sleeping well in the middle of the night, when it suddenly got a bit noisy outside, and I couldn't sleep well. Yeah, I heard it too. Listening to the women's chatter, the manager thought of the woman named Lin Xue who had appeared in Lu Qingyi's room. She keenly sensed that something must have happened last night. A quieter female employee didn't join in the superficial chatter with the others. She instead quietly admired the seamless blend of sea and sky in the distance. As if suddenly noticing something, she let out a sharp cry of surprise. Wait, look at that in the distance. What is that? The women looked over at the sound. A tiny black dot suddenly appeared on the horizon. Starting the size of a mung bean, it rapidly grew to the size of a football. They could vaguely make out that it was actually a person sprinting across the surface of the water. How is that possible? Wan Yu and the others felt their eyes nearly pop out of their heads at this sight. They briefly wondered if they were hallucinating. How could anyone possibly run across the open ocean, and wouldn't they sink? At that moment, the figure in the distance suddenly let out a long whistle that shook for miles. Even the sea surface stirred with ripples, sending layer upon layer of shockwaves toward the cruise ship, leaving everyone with ringing ears. A divine realm expert walking across heaven and earth, standing tall above the crashing waves. It was practically like a myth. Chapter 1209. Is that even human? The women felt their worldview being completely rewritten. If the figure in the distance wasn't human, what else could it possibly be? Was it a fish that could float on water, or perhaps a mermaid? Could a mermaid's single whistle really echo from such a great distance? Suddenly seeing a human floating across the surface of the vast, boundless ocean was an unimaginable, and unacceptable sight for them. Terrified, the women instinctively huddled together in a group. The shock of someone stepping across the water and walking through empty air was indescribably stunning. Is he finally done hiding? Gu Junqing leaned against the railing, watching Dao Tianyan charge in from the distance. He thought to himself that after sleeping with the third sister, Dao Tianyan was truly losing his mind. Sons of destiny inherently possessed a deep spiritual sense regarding danger, whether it threatened their physical bodies or damaged their luck. Protagonists like Dao Tianyan, who held immense amounts of fortune, surprisingly had as many as 7 heroines attached to them. Each of these women was an exceptionally outstanding and beautiful existence. Losing one or two of them didn't actually have a massive impact on Dao Tianyan. For instance, according to the surface requirements of his 9 heavens yin spirit art, absorbing the primordial yin of all 7 sisters would achieve perfection. However, in reality, as long as he established intimate relations with 3 or 4 of the sisters, his cultivation technique could still reach great completion and lead him to invincibility. Yet now, Gu Junqing had already conquered more than half of the 7 sisters. Among those who had crossed paths with him intimately, 4 already belonged to him. Even the second sister was only missing the very final step. Calculated this way, at least 5 of the sisters had given both their bodies and minds to Gu Junqing, cutting all ties with the protagonist, Dao Tianyan. If this continued, Dao Tianyan's cultivation technique would completely lose any possibility of being perfected. At this moment, fortune's warning to Dao Tianyan rang like an alarm bell, spiritually driving him to immediately strike back against Gu Junqing the thief. Rage and resentment had accumulated within Dao Tianyan's chest, ready to erupt at any moment. Too lazy to hide any longer, he instructed the Slaughter Emperor to wait in hiding for an opportunity, while he prepared to confront Gu Junqing directly. After all, he was currently wearing the Azura King's mask, and had changed his clothes, meaning his sisters might not necessarily recognize him. As for everything else, he no longer cared. Wearing a ferocious and bizarre Azura mask that revealed only a pair of golden glinting eyes, Dao Tianyan locked his gaze onto Gu Junqing at the very top of the cruise ship in an instant. Both of them were powerhouses surpassing the divine realm, and their 5 senses had long been enhanced beyond mortal limits. Even separated by hundreds or thousands of meters, they could still clearly see each other's faces and expressions. Seeing this person he loathed the most, Dao Tianyan almost couldn't hold himself back from charging over to slaughter him on the spot. However, when he saw Ji Hanyan standing next to Gu Junqing and staring at him in astonishment, Dao Tianyan forcefully halted his steps. If they were separated by a massive distance, he might still be able to hide his identity. Yet if he fought Gu Junqing with Ji Hanyan standing right by the side, he truly had no way of keeping his identity concealed. Therefore, Dao Tianyan quickly stopped moving forward, and even began to distance himself from the cruise ship. Suspending himself in mid-air above the water, with a swirling vortex of energy beneath his feet, he hovered 1 to 2,000 meters away from the vessel. The visual range of a ship at sea was typically 3 to 5 nautical miles, translating to roughly 6 to 10 kilometers. He believed that at this distance, Ji Hanyan's strength would certainly make it impossible for her to distinguish his identity. Gu Junqing, come over here and accept your death. Dao Tianyan let out another long whistle that shook for miles, sending waves of sound clearly rippling into the ears of everyone on board the cruise ship. Chapter 1210. Who is Gu Junqing? Quite a few people on the cruise ship had already noticed the black dot in the distance. At first, they thought it was just a small piece of reef. But since it could actually transmit a voice, people couldn't help but pay attention. However, quite a few people still felt that someone was standing on a reef calling out to them for help. Yet, the fact that a voice could travel from such a great distance felt a bit unbelievable. No one knew what on earth was happening. Did I hear that right? That mermaid told brother-in-law to come over and die. Could young Master Gu have offended him? With how prominent young Master Gu's family is, it's quite possible he really did offend such people. Regardless of whether this is a mermaid or some martial arts master, we need to hurry and tell young Master Gu to run. People like that are definitely dangerous. Only the staff from Lu Qingyi's studio, who had noticed everything from the very beginning, roughly understood the situation. At this moment, they were thrown into complete chaos, not knowing what to do. It was just that they were too far removed from the martial arts world. They were merely entertainment industry workers, whose focus was solely on showbiz chatter and gossip news. Playing games with entertainment industry tactics was fine, but when facing a truly top-tier martial arts grandmaster, they had never even heard of such beings, let alone seen them. Hearing the provocative words of the person in the distance, Gu Junqing's lips curled slightly. The figure in the distance wore a ferocious Azura mask. Anyone familiar with him would know this person was the notorious Azura King of the Dark World. Dao Tianyan, you finally couldn't hold back anymore? But the other person has completely concealed his form. Is he planning to launch a sneak attack from the shadows? Gu Junqing muttered inwardly. However, he felt no fear. After absorbing Lu Qingyi's spiritual essence just now, his cultivation had finally broken through to the later stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Furthermore, he had successfully cultivated the exclusive physique of the heaven-swallowing demonic art redeemed from the system, the heaven-swallowing demonic body. His pupils were as pitch black as ink, pure and flawless like an infant's eyes, before a golden flame gradually began to burn within them. This was the insightful light I rewarded by the system right at the beginning. Even in the darkest light, his vision was as bright as day, allowing him to see Dao Tianyan as clearly as lines on his own palm, despite being separated by hundreds or thousands of meters. His ears could clearly distinguish countless layers of sound, ranging from birds chirping and insects buzzing to the sounds of plants growing, and even infrasound and ultrasound. His palms had skin as delicate as an infant's, devoid of a single pore. By merely relying on his physical body to absorb the endless vital energy of heaven and earth, he could even step into the realm of an immortal spirit who subsists solely on breath, surviving without food or drink. Having stepped into this realm, he no longer had any doubts about confronting Dao Tianyan, the Azure King. Otherwise, even if he could have defeated Dao Tianyan in the past, there still would have been a possibility of a comeback. Right now, even if they were both in the same realm, he still remained utterly fearless. Standing beside him, Ji Hanyan narrowed her eyes. With her vision, it wasn't difficult to see someone a few thousand meters away, but seeing them clearly as if they were right in front of her was impossible. As for normal people, they could only see a tiny black dot. Although it was far away, Ji Hanyan still felt somewhat suspicious about that figure. That physique always felt as though she had seen it somewhere before. Recalling the acquaintance Gu Junqing had mentioned moments ago, she already had a few guesses in her heart regarding the identity of that distant person, her eyes carrying a trace of complexity. She then cast her gaze toward Gu Junqing beside her, sensing that he was itching for action. Don't go fight him. Chapter 1211. Don't go fight him. Ji Hanyan's expression carried a mix of reluctance, shock, and anger. She had roughly confirmed the identity of the person in the distance, but she still found it hard to believe. Although Dao Tianyan possessed impressive martial arts, she never imagined he had already reached the divine realm. The relationship between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan could be described as entirely incompatible. Under these circumstances, how could she possibly feel at ease letting Gu Junqing go out there? On one hand, she worried that something might happen to Gu Junqing since the divine realm was completely unfamiliar to her. On the other hand, Dao Tianyan still shared a sibling relationship with them regardless of everything else. She had also promised the auntie and teachers at the orphanage that she would take good care of every child there. This was her responsibility. The initiative to step back just now and only ask Gu Junqing to come over alone clearly showed he hadn't ignored her as his second sister. Under these conditions, she truly did not want to see either of them suffer casualties. Second sister, I also have a reason why I must go. Gu Junqing glanced at Ji Hanyan and let out a sigh. To put it bluntly, a son of destiny was simply someone favored by fortune, and that fortune was granted by the will of heaven and earth. No one knew how much of this planet's fortune and energy Gu Junqing had already absorbed. Even though the will of this planet lacked subjective consciousness, its primal instinct was already filled with disgust toward an existence like Gu Junqing. He was essentially like an unremovable tumor. The way of heaven was to reduce the excessive and supplement the deficient, aligning with the laws of thermodynamics, where heat naturally flowed from hot to cold objects. Under normal circumstances, the wealthy should share with the poor, and those with high internal energy should pass it to those with less to help the needy. Yet someone like Gu Junqing would sooner or later drain the world's fortune and energy completely to achieve his own greatness. This was precisely why the signs of a dramatic change in heaven and earth were becoming increasingly obvious. This was meant to provide a suitable environment for the subsequent sons of destiny, where figures like reincarnated immortal emperors or reborn divine lords would eventually emerge. However, sons of destiny of that caliber were no longer something this planet's will could bear. They were protagonists belonging to the cosmic will, or heavenly Tao will type. By the later stages, their combat power would be enough to shatter planets and star systems. In the later stages of the plot, they often marched into the universe, securing a foothold across the vast stellar expanse, or even alternate dimensions. Therefore, Gu Junqing did not want to waste too much time on Dao Tianyan. He had already figured out how to deal with Dao Tianyan, and even that god of war protagonist. Moreover, with the dramatic changes in heaven and earth, this was no longer a purely technological era, and people would sooner or later imperceptibly notice the shifts in their environment. They might even blame others for cultivating immortality without bringing them along. This time was merely a prelude. He, Gu, was willing to act as the vanguard opening up this great trend. He would let this era step into a completely brand new age. Ji Hanyan could not understand Gu Junqing's thoughts, nor did she know what his reasons were. Yet she knew she could no longer stop the man before her. His sharp edge had been honed for long enough. In the distance, Dao Tianyan was staring intently at the direction of Gu Junqing and Ji Hanyan. He did not know what the two of them were discussing. Deep down, he still felt very anxious about what would happen if his second sister recognized him. Yet deep down, he also knew that even if he concealed his identity, it would be impossible for Ji Hanyan not to recognize him. Even if she didn't recognize him now, she would surely learn his identity in the future. However, he could no longer care about all of that right now. If he could kill Gu Junqing this time, even if his second sister blamed him afterward, he would simply refuse to admit it. Chapter 1212. Are you truly determined to fight to the death? Ji Hanyan asked, her expression growing dim. She had mentally prepared herself for this long ago, otherwise, she would not have urged her third sister to make up her mind and choose someone early. Yet, now that the moment had truly arrived, she realized she still did not want to face this outcome. If possible, I will spare his life, Gu Junqing said calmly. He knew Ji Hanyan had already recognized that the person opposite them was Dao Tianyan. However, he truly did not intend to kill Dao Tianyan. It was not out of consideration for Ji Hanyan and her sisters, but rather, because he already had other plans for Dao Tianyan's fate. Even if he won this battle, he would do his best to let him go. His life still held some utility. When that time comes, I will spare him. Second sister, remember to fulfill your promise. Gu Junqing suddenly smiled. What promise? Ji Hanyan asked, stunned by his words. King Yi was cured by me. You should have gone to see her by now, and you surely haven't forgotten what you said, have you? Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow slightly and chuckled softly. Even at a time like this, you are still thinking about such things. You should be worrying about how you are going to win. Remembering that she had indeed promised to give herself to Gu Junqing if he could cure Lu King Yi, Ji Hanyan couldn't help but spit out a soft retort upon seeing him thinking about this during such a critical moment. Gu Junqing, are you going to act like a coward? Get over here right now, then I'll go, lest he gets tired of waiting. Seeing Dao Tianyan shout out from across the way once more, Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow. Will you lose? Ji Hanyan could not help asking. The ocean breeze was fierce, fluttering Gu Junqing's clothes and hair. He turned his head back, smiled faintly at Ji Hanyan, and said, I will win. Who is Gu Junqing? Why do those people keep calling out his name? It looks like there really is someone walking on the water over there. Even the waves can't shake him. How amazing is that? Is this some kind of martial arts master? More and more people on the cruise ship noticed the commotion. Some were using cameras, binoculars, and even cell phone cameras to observe the distant Dao Tianyan. Some were terrified, others astonished, and massive waves of shock surged in almost everyone's hearts. Only now were these peak martial arts practitioners truly revealing themselves to the public. Wait, look at that. Is someone actually flying across? Following a gasp of astonishment, the crowd of onlookers looked in the direction the person was pointing. They saw a figure leap down from the deck, bounding across the ocean surface. The figure intertwined with the morning mist to create a hazy curtain of light, speeding across the sea like a flash of lightning. With every step he took, he left a mark resembling a lotus flower upon the water. Walking step by step upon the lotuses, he drifted through the air as gracefully as an immortal. Holy shit, is that an immortal? Can someone really walk on water? Am I dreaming? Everyone stood dumbfounded. The shocking sight of someone treading on water and stepping through the empty air made them feel as though they were still dreaming. Moreover, that figure's speed was terrifyingly fast, carrying him hundreds of meters away from the cruise ship in the blink of an eye. Just as the crowd was still discussing how such a magical thing could exist in this world, the women from Lu Qingyi's studio also stared in wide-eyed amazement. That really looks like young Master Gu. Young Master Gu is actually this amazing? Not only is he handsome, but he also possesses incredible martial arts skills. The women chattered excitedly among themselves. Any fear in their hearts had vanished by now. The person on the other side was clearly looking for trouble with Gu Junqing, and they even felt like cheering him on. Quick, go call Sister Lu over. Stop talking. The manager was the first to regain her composure and hurriedly ordered the staff to go find Lu Qingyi. Under the current circumstances, Gu Junqing was clearly heading over to fight that person. If anything happened to injure their prospective son-in-law, it was a responsibility none of them could bear. Chapter 1213. Ji Hanyan quietly watched Gu Junqing's receding figure. A trace of complexity flashed through the depths of her eyes, and she whispered softly, no matter what happens, my heart to walk this path with you will never change. She had already made up her mind to stand by Gu Junqing's side no matter what. Ji Hanyan couldn't help tightening her grip on the object in her hand. Waves rolled and the ocean breeze howled. Yet amidst this turbulent sea, two figures stood unshakable, as if walking on flat ground. Gu Junqing's robes fluttered, seeming to merge with the sea wind. His eyes were as deep as the ocean, flashing with a mysterious light as if they could perceive all things in the world. Dao Tianyan was wrapped in a black robe that danced wildly in the wind. His eyes revealed a deep hatred, burning with an irreconcilable enmity toward Gu Junqing. Whenever his gaze fell upon Gu Junqing, it felt as though he could shoot out icy blades straight into a person's heart. Gu Junqing, you actually dare to come. Dao Tianyan let out a cold laugh. Ah, eighth brother, why must you put yourself through this? Gu Junqing smiled slightly, his smile as gentle as a spring breeze. You knew it was me? Dao Tianyan's eyes narrowed slightly, though he wasn't too surprised. Just as he would recognize Gu Junqing even if the man turned to ashes, he had only worn a mask and changed his clothes, so Gu Junqing recognizing him instantly was expected. Not only do I know you are Dao Tianyan, but I also know you are the Azure King. Gu Junqing sighed and shook his head. This single sentence made Dao Tianyan's heart tremble, no matter how deep his composure was. Ever since returning to the Xia country, he had rarely exposed his true identity. Even though he knew Gu Junqing kept suppressing the Azure Guild, he had simply thought their paths naturally clashed rather than being targeted personally. But looking at it now, Gu Junqing had known his identity for a long time. This truly justified him treating Gu Junqing as his greatest enemy. You certainly investigate thoroughly, but so what? Today, you will take this secret and sleep forever at the bottom of the sea. Dao Tianyan laughed coldly. Are you sure you want to ignore the wishes of your many sisters, and have me die without a burial place? If so, your sisters are going to become widows. Gu Junqing ignored Dao Tianyan's words and continued speaking with a smile. Ding. Host has enraged the protagonist Dao Tianyan. Host villain value increased by 1000. Ding. Host has enraged the protagonist Dao Tianyan. Host villain value increased by 1000. Ding. Host has enraged the protagonist Dao Tianyan. Host villain value increased by 1000. Gu Junqing's heart stirred slightly, and he felt a bit amused. Despite experiencing so much, Dao Tianyan was still young at heart. Whenever his 7 sisters were mentioned, he was still easily influenced. Go back, and don't let your sisters worry. I don't want to fight you. Gu Junqing sighed, his tone filled with helplessness. It sounded as though he truly wished to avoid any conflict with Dao Tianyan. Moreover, his tone carried the distinct air of someone facing a rebellious younger brother. Are you afraid of dying? What else is there for us to say? If you're scared, get the hell out of here and never appear in front of me again. Dao Tianyan sneered. Of course, it was impossible for him to let Gu Junqing go. How could he possibly spare a man who had tainted his sisters' bodies? The mere thought of his beautiful and playful 7th sister surrendering under this man's body made his heart feel as though it were being slashed by knives. Can we truly not reconcile? Gu Junqing's face was full of heartbreak. Gu Junqing, stop running your mouth. Everything between us ends today. Dao Tianyan roared. Did you hear all that? I tried my best, but there's nothing I can do. Gu Junqing suddenly produced a walkie-talkie and spoke helplessly into it. I heard it. Ji Hanyan's voice came through the device. Dao Tianyan's cold expression shattered piece by piece at the sound of her voice. He stared at Gu Junqing before him, consumed by grief and anger. Chapter 1214. Gu Junqing, you despicable and insidious villain, Dao Tianyan said, filled with grief and anger. Now, he couldn't even try to make excuses. Moreover, looking at Ji Hanying's attitude of not even bothering to care, even if he eliminated Gu Junqing, he would still lose his standing in the hearts of his sisters. As the second eldest sister, Ji Hanying held far too much weight among the sisters, and even the eldest sister mostly listened to her. If Ji Hanying grew to despise him, the consequences were simply too much for him to bear. Still want to fight? Gu Junqing looked at Dao Tianyan leisurely, wearing an expression of absolute confidence. In reality, however, he simply wanted to clear his own name. Since the second sister and the others were in such a difficult position, he would just remove that difficulty for them. This was already the greatest amount of goodwill he could possibly show. Besides, he knew for a fact that Dao Tianyan would never let him go anyway. Swish! A burst of true qi tore through the air, directly shattering the walkie-talkie in Gu Junqing's hand and sending it tumbling into the water. Gu Junqing glanced over to see that Dao Tianyan had already pulled back his outstretched hand. Do you think dragging the second sister out will stop me from killing you? If this is your trump card against me, then prepare to meet your end. The face hidden beneath Dao Tianyan's mask had twisted into a ferocious expression. Gu Junqing had completely ruined his image in the second sister's eyes. What else was there left for him to waste words on with Gu Junqing? Waves churned and fierce winds howled as 2 figures stood unshakable upon the surface of the sea. Looking at the downed walkie-talkie in his hand, the smile on Gu Junqing's face gradually turned wicked. The two exchanged a single glance, speaking no extra words as sparks flew between their gazes. Dao Tianyan moved in a flash, transforming into a streak of red light that charged rapidly toward Gu Junqing, his speed even triggering a sonic boom in the air. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Gu Junqing's eyes as he let out a cold smile, his figure likewise transforming into a golden phantom to meet the charge. Their figures crossed in midair, every single collision accompanied by astonishing fluctuations of energy. His cultivation technique bloomed with a dazzling golden light, radiant like sunlight spilling across the sea's surface. Golden inner energy surged from within his body, its profound true qi even surpassing that of Dao Tianyan. Gu Junqing, you really aren't that simple. Following a brief collision, Dao Tianyan let out a long howl to the heavens, slamming a blazing red palm down onto the surface of the sea. Sizzle. The seawater within tens of meters radius was frantically heated, kicking up a skyful of mist that unexpectedly condensed into numerous misty swords. Each of these swords was roughly an inch long, formed purely from vaporized seawater. They were crystal clear, with their edges flashing brilliantly and appearing incomparably sharp. In an instant, the sea area for several hundred meters around transformed into a Jura slaughterhouse as the misty swords frantically shot toward Gu Junqing. Seeing this, Gu Junqing merely flipped his palms, letting a strand of golden profound energy pierce through his body to transform into sharp energy blades that batted down the incoming water swords one after another. His deep inner energy was simply not something the misty swords condensed by Dao Tianyan could block, crushing Dao Tianyan's water curtain almost instantly and shattering all his swords. To outsiders, the golden energy blades not only struck down the misty swords, but also shot straight through the rain curtain of vapor toward Dao Tianyan, creating an entirely one-sided situation. Dao Tianyan's expression shifted slightly, and he hurriedly waved his long sleeves as a red protective barrier formed a solid shield before him, almost condensing into a physical substance to block Gu Junqing's infiltrating attacks. Yet with every block, his gaze grew even colder, as if he wished nothing more than to hack Gu Junqing into 10,000 pieces. He had never expected Gu Junqing's strength to be so terrifying. Yet he had never realized that this insidious fellow Gu Junqing usually hid his power so deeply. There were not many golden energy blades that managed to pass through the mist-shrouded region, and Dao Tianyan simply threw a single punch, without any true qi, relying purely on his physical body to forcefully shatter those few remaining energy blasts. Gu Junqing, to think you've hidden yourself this deeply. How could someone like you, who stays by my sister's side every single day, not harbor malicious intentions toward her? Having calmed down considerably after witnessing Gu Junqing's true strength, Dao Tianyan roared out loud. He increasingly felt that Gu Junqing must have sinister plots against his sisters, and that all his past actions had been completely fake. Hey, you actually guessed it right. But would you like to guess whose room I spent last night in? Gu Junqing gave a calm smile, his handsome brows and eyes brimming with amusement. Hearing this, Dao Tianyan's mind trembled, as he could sense the profound implication behind Gu Junqing's words. Furthermore, he had actually noticed something else amiss. Namely, where on earth had his third sister gone? The cruise ship was already surrounded by tourists watching his grudge match against Gu Junqing, yet only a single person had never appeared. That person was Lin Xue. Logically speaking, given the relationship between the third sister and them, it was impossible for her not to show up here. Yet he had never once seen the third sister appear by the second sister's side. What did you do to my third sister? Dao Tianyan's voice trembled as he heard those words. What do you think? However, I can leak a little news to you. King Yi was utterly exhausted last night. Gu Junqing's lips curled into a slight, leisurely smile. Gu Junqing, I will tear you to pieces. Your entire family will be annihilated because of you, and I, Dao Tianyan, swear to exterminate every single member of your household. Dao Tianyan roared up at the heavens, his hatred for Gu Junqing surpassing all boundaries of past and present. Is that so? Just you? Courtesy demands reciprocity, so why don't you take a move of mine as well? Gu Junqing couldn't be bothered to say anything more to him. Disrupting his state of mind with just a few simple lines was enough. In truth, he also wanted to test out what his current strength actually amounted to. Gu Junqing's movements were as fast as lightning, leaving everyone unable to keep up. He turned his palm into a blade, and as his hands flew, a golden sword chi slashed toward Dao Tianyan like a razor-sharp edge. Where the sword chi passed, the seawater was cleaved open into a deep fissure, as if even heaven and earth would be severed by the single strike of his. Dao Tianyan was not afraid in the least. Knowing that the third sister and Gu Junqing had already engaged in a relationship, his sanity was completely on the verge of collapse. The seventh sister was one thing, but now even the third sister had slept with Gu Junqing. Might the remaining sisters, who flirted with Gu Junqing and stood on his side, have also been intimate with him? He had never dared to think about it before, but now countless guesses and suspicions made it impossible for Dao Tianyan to maintain his sanity any longer. The figures of the two men moved rapidly across the surface of the sea, every single clash accompanied by astonishing energetic ripples. Waves churned beneath their feet, and the surrounding seawater was shaken into violent tempests by their power, nearly turning the area into a raging ocean. Grandmaster-level experts could command the power of heaven and earth, let alone the two of them, who were divine realm experts, and belonged to the very cream of the crop within the divine realm. That kind of majestic heavenly might had long since left all the tourists on the cruise ship dumbfounded and utterly beside themselves. Chapter 1215. Too strong. When Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan first exchanged blows, this was the only feeling shared by everyone on the cruise ship. The two of them seemed less like human beings and more like divine generals or immortals capable of overturning rivers and seas. The vast ocean was churned into towering waves and a bloody tempest by their clash. However, the gap in their cultivation realms was ultimately too vast. Even though Dao Tianyan was a child of fortune, who could cross realms to challenge opponents as easily as cutting vegetables, Gu Junqing had never once slacked off in his preparations to counter these protagonists. Gu Junqing currently practiced three distinct cultivation techniques. The first was a pure true qi based on the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, focusing on cultivating inner breath with a pure and mild nature. Another was the true qi derived from the heaven-swallowing demonic art. This technique was not merely for combat and defense, but rather excelled at devouring the physical essence of others. Such devouring was not a simple absorption of energy, but a direct stripping of the opponent's foundational power to transform it into the cultivator's own strength. By combining these righteous and demonic forces, he never had to worry about the risk of deviation or losing control. Additionally, there was an ancient and mysterious physical cultivation technique he had exchanged from the system. Practitioners could use specific breathing techniques, footwork, and mental cultivation methods to forge their bodies until they were as crystal clear as glazed glass, yet possessed the toughness and hardness of diamond. This focused entirely on physical enhancement, including increased body flexibility, reaction speed, and physical strength. Given the resources Gu Junqing could currently mobilize, combined with the villain points exchanged through the system, his physical body had reached an even deeper level of mastery than his true qi cultivation. Yet in his battle against Dao Tianyan right now, he had only used 50% of the true qi from the Yellow Emperor's inner canon. His overall strength probably hadn't even reached 30%. Even so, Dao Tianyan was already unable to hold on. Following another collision between the two, Gu Junqing stood safe and sound in his original spot, while Dao Tianyan was knocked directly down into the sea. Gu Junqing, realizing that he was utterly unable to defeat Gu Junqing head-on, Dao Tianyan roared out his name in a fury. Raging flames of anger were on the verge of swallowing his sanity. Before he could finish, however, a streak of golden energy struck again, startling Dao Tianyan into clamping his mouth shut and mustering all his strength to block it, only to be driven back into the water once more. Every single time Dao Tianyan attempted to emerge from the sea, a bolt of energy would shoot toward him. Each and every time, he was relentlessly knocked back down. It seemed as though Gu Junqing no longer wished to toy with him. When Dao Tianyan finally broke through the surface of the sea once more, his hair and clothing were soaked and clinging to his body, making it impossible to maintain any semblance of his usual image as he was thoroughly drenched by the surging seawater. A look of venomous malice appeared in Dao Tianyan's eyes for the very first time. Ever since he had mastered the 9 heavens Yang divine art, he had never suffered such a humiliating defeat. Ever since he had traveled alone to Eagle Country all that time ago, he had never seen anyone who could contend with him in a head-on collision. So what if their cultivation realm was higher than his? He was still fully capable of cross-realm challenges, and not just by a single tier. What? Is that all you've got? By this time, the sky had gradually cleared up, and the thin mist condensed by Dao Tianyan over the sea had long since dissipated. The morning light shone upon Gu Junqing's face, making him look almost like a heavenly deity. Yet the gaze he cast toward Dao Tianyan was completely devoid of fluctuation. That indifferent expression seemed designed purely to showcase his majesty and power. Gu Junqing, how dare you humiliate me? Unable to bear Gu Junqing's utter disregard, Dao Tianyan clenched his fists tightly, veins bulging all over his body, as his eyes seemed to shoot out blazing flames. When had he, the Azura King, ever suffered such an insult? Chapter 1216. Humiliate you? I never humiliate people. Dao Tianyan, as long as you beg me. How about I spare you? Gu Junqing's eyes were deep, and his ink-black hair drifted in the wind, radiating peerless grace. At this moment, he looked down with amused interest at the disheveled Dao Tianyan, acting as if showing great mercy. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Why did he look just like one of those villains who had victory completely in hand from a television drama? Hopefully, Dao Tianyan wouldn't start shouting about friendship or love later and suddenly have his hidden potential explode. Even Gu Junqing found it slightly amusing. However, he wasn't worried, as he had roughly figured out what Dao Tianyan's trump card was. Thinking of this, Gu Junqing's gaze couldn't help but flick imperceptibly toward a nearby direction. Do you think you've won just like this? Dao Tianyan laughed out of extreme anger. Oh, are you saying you want to keep fighting? Gu Junqing said with playful interest. You'll know if you try. 9 heavens Yang divine palm. Dao Tianyan suddenly formed hand seals, and a fiery red profound energy surged from his palms, gathering in his hands as he soared forward directly toward Gu Junqing. Gu Junqing maintained a calm demeanor, closing his eyes slightly as if merging with heaven and earth, while a faint golden light surrounded his body, effortlessly neutralizing Dao Tianyan's attacks whenever they struck. The figures of the two crossed over the sea surface, moving at a speed so fast it was almost impossible to catch. Second sister, what's going on? Why is Gu Junqing fighting someone over there? While Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan were locked in a fierce battle, Lu Qingyi endured the soreness in her delicate body and hurried anxiously to Ji Hanying's side. In the distance, the figures of the two clashed at blinding speed, and from such a far distance, they couldn't clearly see what the current situation actually was. Do you remember what I told you last night? Ji Hanying couldn't worry about her third sister right now, her gaze remaining fixed tightly on the distance as a hint of complexity flickered in her beautiful eyes. She had originally thought her own strength was already quite impressive, but the gap between her and these two was simply incomparable. Perhaps only the eldest sister could defeat them. If Lu Qingyi found out that the person opposite Gu Junqing was actually Dao Tianyan, that kid who had always concealed his true abilities, she would likely be shocked as well. Last night? Lu Qingyi's mind recalled the scenes from last night, yet her mind only brought up bits and pieces of her lingering intimacy with Gu Junqing, along with the images of herself being manipulated in every possible position, pressed down, lifted up, straddled, and pinned underneath, along with that body as hard as refined steel and a driving force that seemed to never stop. Ji Hanying had originally been waiting for Lu Qingyi's shock, but Lu Qingyi didn't reply for a long time. She turned her head to look at her younger sister, only to see her fair, delicate cheeks suffused with a faint blush, resembling a newly bloomed peach blossom in spring, tender and vibrant. Her eyes also revealed a trace of infatuated intoxication. Ji Hanying irritably patted Lu Qingyi's head, completely reassured now that her sister had finally let go of that period of her past. Forget about any aversion to men. She just hoped her sister wouldn't get addicted to doing that with Gu Junqing in the future. All right, I know what happened to you last night. Also, you'd better cover your neck. It's covered in hickeys. Today's incident will definitely cause a sensation, so you must be careful not to get photographed. Ji Hanying glared at Lu Qingyi once more. Don't worry. Lu Qingyi snapped back to reality, feeling somewhat embarrassed in her heart. However, because it was her beloved second sister after all, she didn't stay shy for long. With her heart tightening, she began watching Gu Junqing's battle in the distance once again. Wait, second sister, when you mentioned what happened last night, could you possibly mean the thing between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan? Is the person on the other side Dao Tianyan? Lu Qingyi wasn't a fool. Even if she acted a bit silly in front of Ji Hanying, that was only because she was with her own older sister. Soon thinking of something, she couldn't help letting out a cry of shock. Chapter 1217. Seeing that Ji Hanying did not answer her question, but instead continued to stare anxiously at the distant battle, Lu Qingyi knew her guess was right. Lu Qingyi felt as though her mind was currently a complete mess. It was as if she were still living inside a dream. Lu Qingyi felt she had seen countless grand scenes in her life, but the battle between those two in the distance still left her too astonished to speak. It felt as though everyone was originally just an ordinary person. Suddenly, someone started flying next to them, and claimed to be cultivating immortality, while another person pulled out a spark lens, and claimed to be the human host of Ultraman. So everyone was actually that powerful, yet they had all been hiding it the whole time? I remember telling you that neither of them is simple. Ji Haining glanced at the shocked Lu Qingyi with a helpless expression. But I didn't expect them to be this complicated. Lu Qingyi bitter smiled, as she gazed at the two frantically colliding figures in the distance. Divine realm experts dominate the mortal world, capable of standing against nations single-handedly. Aside from fearing certain secret weapons of major contemporary powers, such as railguns, nuclear bombs, or hydrogen bombs, they practically fear no other existence. They even possess the qualification to sit on equal footing with, or even tower above, the leaders of nations. Such figures unexpectedly existed right by her side, with not just one, but two of them. How could this not make someone feel surprised? So who has the upper hand right now? Lu Qingyi's martial prowess could only be considered ordinary. She could handle everyday people, but compared to true masters, the gap was far too vast. Therefore, she was completely in the dark regarding the current situation on both sides. She could only rely on certain equipment to observe the distant fight between the two. Don't worry, your little lover is currently beating Dao Tianyan down, Ji Haining said indifferently. Had Ji Haining not been a grandmaster-level assassin herself, even she would have found it difficult to track. Lu Qingyi's willingness to engage in an intimate relationship with Gu Junqing showed that her heart had long since leaned toward him. People often say even family members can turn their backs, let alone merely a childhood playmate. Even though Lu Qingyi valued Dao Tianyan a great deal, compared to the position Gu Junqing held in her heart, the difference was simply that of a grain of sand versus a towering mountain. As Lu Qingyi's older sister, she understood her third sister very well. What do you mean by my little lover? Isn't he your man too, second sister? Hearing that Gu Junqing had the upper hand, Lu Qingyi felt much more relaxed inside, and began to banter with Ji Haining. Right, second sister, I heard from Gu Junqing that you haven't been intimate with him yet. Does that mean I'm technically not your junior anymore? How about calling me older sister to hear how it sounds? Lu Qingyi suddenly thought of something, her eyes lighting up. Looks like you're asking for some family discipline, aren't you? Ji Haining originally didn't want to bother with her giant baby younger sister who was approaching 30, but upon hearing those words, she couldn't help herself anymore. As soon as those words came out, Lu Qingyi immediately didn't dare to speak loudly anymore. The sisters dared to chat about anything, but at their age, getting her pants pulled down and her bottom spanked by Ji Haining would simply be far too humiliating. Did you two use protection last night? Ji Haining asked out of nowhere. What? Lu Qingyi was stunned. If something happens to Gu Junqing, you might at least be able to leave behind a bloodline for his family. Ji Haining glanced sideways at Lu Qingyi and let out a soft HMP. The two chatted casually back and forth. Although their conversation seemed quite deep, their minds were actually entirely focused on Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan. They could only find a bit of bitter amusement in such a situation. Chapter 1218. Dao Tianyan had completely fallen into a bitter struggle. He couldn't even remember the last time he had been forced to use his full strength. Yet, he still completely fell short compared to Gu Junqing. He even felt as though Gu Junqing wasn't using his full strength at all. This realization filled Dao Tianyan's heart with humiliation. He refused to believe this reality. Dao Tianyan let out an explosive shout, his figure flickering as he suddenly transformed into 10 phantoms in midair. They surrounded Gu Junqing tightly from all directions. Each phantom unleashed a different martial art, changing through 10 distinct techniques in rapid succession. Massive energy ripples echoed across the entire sea. The violent winds generated by this extreme energy fluctuation could even be felt by the cruise ship miles away. The waves grew higher and higher. Finally, after building momentum to the absolute limit, 10 beams of light were suddenly unleashed, all attacking Gu Junqing trapped in the center. 10 dragons incinerating the heavens. This was the top mystical killing move of his 9 heavens yang divine art. The power he wielded was enough to kill opponents of the exact same rank. Even divine tier experts like the Killing Emperor didn't qualify for him to use this. However, using it would plunge him into a state of weakness afterward, but given the current situation, he had no choice. If this demon-like man Gu Junqing wasn't weakened, even his final backup plans might fail. Not bad. Gu Junqing nodded slightly upon seeing the move Dao Tianyan deployed. This was the first time Dao Tianyan had used a martial art that could make him take things slightly seriously. However, that was about it. Gu Junqing had already traveled far enough down the path of the divine realm. If it weren't for solidifying his foundations, relying on the spiritual essence he plundered from the four sisters might have already been enough for him to enter the golden core stage. Of course, even without suppressing him through cultivation level alone, his terrifying foundations would allow him to crush Dao Tianyan even if they were at the exact same rank. How much more so given the current situation? However, how could he possibly let such a massive amount of energy go to waste? Abyssal soul devouring, heavens bearing feast. Gu Junqing's eyes flashed with icy coldness as his body slowly rose into the air. A magnificent, grand, and ruthless voice echoed across the sea, sounding like the very source of all living beings' terror. A streak of black energy fluctuations was released from Gu Junqing's body, surging away in all directions like 10,000 waves. Majestic and vast like thick ink in water, it enveloped the void in the blink of an eye, tightly wrapping around Dao Tianyang's 10 dragons incinerating the heavens. Almost instantly, the 10 dragons incinerating the heavens vanished from the sea surface. Everything around Gu Junqing, including the air and seawater, was completely devoured. If an ordinary person were inside this space, they would even face the risk of suffocation. It wasn't until Gu Junqing withdrew his spell that the seawater and air finally rushed back in with surging momentum. What kind of spell is this? Dao Tianyang stared blankly at the scene before him. Everything unfolding before his eyes made Dao Tianyang feel a wave of complete bewilderment and even panic. Looking at Gu Junqing, whose body was once again enveloped in golden light, Dao Tianyang felt an extreme sense of terror. What on earth was the deal with that terrifying, depraved, chaotic aura that seemed to devour everything just now? That has nothing to do with you anymore. Gu Junqing licked his thin lips, as if tasting some delicious food, before speaking to Dao Tianyang with an indifferent expression. Unease welled up inside Dao Tianyang's heart. He had already unleashed his ultimate technique, yet not only had it failed to injure Gu Junqing, it even seemed to put him in an even better state. Furthermore, his ultimate technique had inexplicably vanished just like that. What on earth was that black energy overflowing from Gu Junqing's body? Countless questions clogged Dao Tianyang's mind, making him feel an increasingly intense wave of unease. Chapter 1219. Not far from the battlefield, a nearly transparent figure was preparing himself. It was the killing emperor, who had hidden himself after conferring with Dao Tianyang. By precisely controlling the light around him, he could vanish from anyone's vision and remain completely hidden on the side. This was a skill he had mastered after breaking through to the divine realm. Even ordinary divine realm experts who could use the refraction or scattering of light to become visually invisible still left behind flaws. Not only could peers in the divine realm spot the clues, but even grandmaster level masters could detect them. Yet his ability to conceal himself made it difficult even for his peers to discover him. This was the very skill he relied upon to survive in the shadows. To have a divine realm expert sneak right up to one's doorstep meant shedding a layer of skin even if one survived. He had once relied on this exact skill to stalk a target for half a month, successfully ambushing and injuring the leader of the Dark Titans, one of the world's top 10 dark organizations. Initially, when he lost to Dao Tianyang, he accepted the defeat, while secretly feeling unimpressed. He had felt that the Azura King, who was blown out of proportion by outsiders, was nothing special. In head-to-head combat with peers, the Azura King often found himself at a disadvantage. He had only become famous throughout the dark world because of his assassination skills. But now, watching the battlefield between the legendary Azura King and his intended target, the killing emperor felt a chill run through his entire body. The distant battlefield was a storm of violent energy, with explosive forces dancing in all directions like halos of cloud. The towering waves churned, and the sea within hundreds of meters beneath them sat lower than anywhere else, its surging aura seemingly capable of shaking heaven and earth. This was definitely not someone who had just stepped into the divine realm. He had already traveled very far down that path. He just knew that the target the Azura King wanted to assassinate was not simple. A bitter taste lingered in the killing emperor's heart as he found the situation utterly absurd. That mysterious powerhouse, named Gu Junqing, looked to be only in his late teens or early 20s. Although cultivation could enhance one's youthfulness, he was simply far too young. To become a divine realm expert at such an age made it impossible to fathom how the man even cultivated. Even if he had started practicing from inside his mother's womb, it shouldn't have been this fast. Furthermore, the strength displayed by the Azura King now was worlds apart from when they had fought earlier. It was obvious that the Azura King had held back during their encounter. If he didn't genuinely have a favor to ask of him, he would have turned around and left immediately without a second thought. However, the current situation was 2 against 1, and he wasn't entirely useless. As long as he found an opening, he believed he could still help the Azura King defeat his opponent. Meanwhile, Dao Tianyang was trapped in a situation where he had complaints he couldn't voice. He felt as though he had unleashed his full strength, operating at least 50% above his usual baseline. It was as if facing this particular enemy automatically granted him hidden buffs. Yet despite all that, he was still being thoroughly suppressed by Gu Junqing. He knew the killing emperor was searching for an opening, but given his current state and momentum, creating even a tiny flaw or weakness in Gu Junqing was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Just as Dao Tianyang was pondering what to do, he noticed that Gu Junqing's offensive momentum had weakened considerably. His moves were no longer as razor-sharp as before. Could he be running out of stamina? A flicker of hope and joy surfaced in Dao Tianyang's eyes. He figured that Gu Junqing was merely a rich young master, who lacked the harsh tempering he had endured. Even if Gu Junqing had reached this realm through innate talent and resources, his combat experience and accumulation certainly couldn't match his own. Perhaps he was just a mass-produced anomaly with lofty cultivation realms, but pitifully thin true chi. With this thought in mind, Dao Tianyang felt an extra 2 parts of strength welling up out of nowhere. He deliberately began luring Gu Junqing toward the location he had previously agreed upon with the killing emperor. He was going to execute a righteous 2-on-1 ambush. Chapter 1220. Second sister, look, why are they fighting further and further away? And is Gu Junqing running out of steam? Why does it feel like he has no strength left? Did he use up too much energy last night, or something? Lu Qingyi held binoculars in one hand and grabbed Ji Haniang's arm with the other, jumping up and down anxiously. Ji Haniang cast a difficult-to-read glance at Lu Qingyi. They say a woman's IQ drops when she falls in love, and she could see that her sister's had dropped quite a bit. Even so, she also felt that something was amiss. After Dao Tianyan's obvious ultimate move was broken by Gu Junqing, Gu Junqing had clearly held the upper hand, leaving Dao Tianyan with almost no room to counterattack. Yet right now, Gu Junqing's moves had suddenly become much softer. Not only did this give Dao Tianyan a chance to catch his breath, but it also ceded a lot of the initiative. In a battle of this caliber, whoever held the initiative possessed a massive advantage. Could it really be as Lu Qingyi said, that Gu Junqing was about to run out of stamina? Although she knew it surely couldn't be that simple, her heart still sank involuntarily. Are there any lifeboats left on the cruise ship? Ji Haniang calmed down and gazed intently at Lu Qingyi. There should be. Wait, sister, are you planning to go over there too? Lu Qingyi looked at the distant, roaring expanse of churning waves and asked with a trembling voice. If something really happens, there's no helping it. Ji Haniang's expression remained completely steady, having long since prepared herself. The fallout caused by two Divine Realm experts meant that even a Grandmaster who rashly barged in would likely lose half their life. Yet she simply couldn't just stand by and do nothing. If Gu Junqing truly lost, she felt she would risk her life to bring him back. Thinking of Gu Junqing's confident and handsome face, Ji Haniang's heart had already leaned toward him in the conflict between him and Dao Tianyan. However, as the second eldest among the 7 sisters, that sense of responsibility didn't allow her to show favoritism. Yet now, facing a matter of life and death, she realized Gu Junqing's life was enough for her to discard everything else. I understand, I'll go find. Wait, the situation doesn't seem right. Lu Qingyi, whose expression was a complex mix of emotions, was about to go look for a boat. She had planned to follow her second sister over there, refusing to believe that Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan wouldn't care at all about their lives as sisters. If they truly couldn't be reasoned with, the worst that could happen was that she would perish in the depths of the ocean alongside Gu Junqing. Yet as she observed the battle between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan once more, Lu Qingyi noticed something was wrong. Although Gu Junqing kept retreating step by step, seemingly barely able to fend off Dao Tianyan's onslaught, his expression remained entirely calm, without a single ripple of panic on his face. It was as if he still held total control over the situation. This realization settled the panic in both Lu Qingyi and Ji Haniang's hearts. They should choose to trust Gu Junqing. Meanwhile, as Dao Tianyan intentionally orchestrated it and Gu Junqing half-heartedly played along, the battlefield quickly shifted to the waters near the killing emperor. Even Dao Tianyan himself began to feel that something was amiss. Things were progressing far too smoothly, so smoothly that it genuinely felt terrifying. Instead of him luring Gu Junqing over, it felt more like he was walking right into a trap himself. Could it be that he's discovered the killing emperor's position? A heavy sinking feeling gripped Dao Tianyan's heart. Yet that didn't make sense either. If Gu Junqing had discovered the killing emperor's position, shouldn't he be running in the opposite direction? How could he willingly walk right into someone else's ambush point like walking into a net? Or was he so confident in a 2-on-1 fight that he was doing this deliberately to force the killing emperor out of hiding? A vague sense of unease crept into Dao Tianyan's mind, but he had no other viable options left. He could only follow the plan he had previously agreed upon with the killing emperor, gradually guiding Gu Junqing toward the hunting point designated for the assassination. Chapter 1221. Watching the battlefield between the two draw closer and closer to him, the killing emperor subconsciously felt that Dao Tianyan's plan was about to succeed. He had originally agreed with Dao Tianyan that after boarding the cruise ship, he would look for an opportunity to assassinate Gu Junqing in secret. After all, no one else on the cruise ship knew of his existence. Gu Junqing might not even be careful enough to guard against his assassination. Yet who could have known that plans could never keep up with sudden changes? Upon laying eyes on the man named Gu Junqing, Dao Tianyan had directly rushed up to provoke him without being able to hold back. With no other choice, he could only hide to the side and watch the two of them fight. At first, he still had a certain degree of confidence in Dao Tianyan. After all, no matter what, Dao Tianyan was a king of the dark world, and the renowned Azura king of the entire underworld. Yet fighting up to this point, the situation on the field had already become much clearer. Dao Tianyan was not only clearly unable to do anything to his opponent, but he was also trapped in a massive disadvantage. The opponent seemed to be toying with Dao Tianyan as if playing a game. Such strength was something he could not hope to reach no matter what. He even already wanted to pull out of the deal. Intuition told him that the terrifying man named Gu Junqing was simply not someone he could contend against. The reason he was willing to help Dao Tianyan was partly out of appreciation for his strength, and most importantly, because Dao Tianyan could heal his injuries and provide a chance for him to advance further. If the purpose of a mortal struggle wasn't for hatred, it was definitely aimed at profits. If both sides fought to the death, and the price paid far outweighed the gains, then there was simply no need for this matter to happen at all. The same applied to his conflict with Gu Junqing. If the benefits he gained were far smaller than the risks he had to take, he had no reason to fight to the death for Dao Tianyan. At worst, he could just kidnap Lin Xue according to the original plan and call it a day. Just as he felt that Dao Tianyan's plan was destined to fail, and even intended to sneak away on his own, the situation on the field shifted once more. Dao Tianyan had actually driven Gu Junqing right into his ambush location just as planned. For some reason, a prickling sensation crawled through his heart at this moment. He constantly felt that something was amiss. Why did Gu Junqing, who had just been suppressing Dao Tianyan, suddenly soften up? It felt as though the opponent was deliberately trying to lure him out. However, out of confidence in his own movement arts and concealment abilities, he could only forcefully suppress his inner unease. He simply refused to believe that anyone in this world could discover his existence, while he remained motionless and concealed himself to the absolute limit. The killing emperor assumed that Gu Junqing's true qi was simply running low, which was why he was temporarily driven over to his side by Dao Tianyan. If that were the case, the killing emperor felt that the opportunity had arrived once more. In a head-to-head fight, he was no match for either of these two. Yet under the cover of a sneak attack, things would be completely different. He had carried out cross-rank ambushes before. Back when he was still a grandmaster, he had once hunkered down on a snowy iceberg for 3 days and 3 nights to successfully ambush a Divine Realm enemy. Although he didn't personally kill the target with his own hands back then, that Divine Realm enemy died not long after he returned. Afterwards, the target's entire family was also wiped out by others. When word of this matter spread out, his name as the Killing Emperor truly became renowned. He was the Emperor of Assassination. If he could kill across ranks, could he fail to injure an opponent of the same rank? Like a ghost, the Killing Emperor silently pressed his transparent body against the surface of the sea, his form even drifting along with the seawater, as if he had completely melted into the water. Sensing that the battlefield of the two men was gradually drawing near, the Killing Emperor's gaze grew as cold as ice, every breath seemingly calculating the distance to his target. Chapter 1222. The Killing Emperor, that king of assassination within the dark world, was holding his breath in deep concentration at this moment, waiting for the optimal moment to strike. His heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of the waves, every rise and fall seemingly recounting his determination and calm. The light of dawn cast a layer of pale yellow radiance across the sea surface, forming a sharp contrast with the Killing Emperor's transparent body. He was like a ghost, quietly lurking on the surface of the sea as he waited for his prey to step into the trap on its own. The battle between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan grew increasingly intense. The surging energy between them seemed ready to drag everything in the surroundings into the chaos. The casual fallout of a single palm strike from either of them accidentally hitting the vast ocean would trigger a burst of violent waves, followed by the floating corpses of countless fish. However, all of this was no longer important in the eyes of the Killing Emperor. The only thing he cared about was how to seize this split-second opportunity. Finally, when Gu Junqing was forced back several steps by a fierce palm wind from Dao Tianyan, his stance growing slightly unstable, the Killing Emperor knew his chance had arrived. He instantly leaped out of the seawater, slicing across the sky like a streak of lightning. A blade radiance flashing with chilling light had already appeared in his hand, his signature weapon, and the witness to countless successful assassinations. Oh, Gu Junqing seemed to only just notice at this moment, shifting the palm strike originally aimed at Dao Tianyan to meet the Killing Emperor instead. Yet the Killing Emperor was already fully prepared, his speed surpassing anyone's imagination. His figure traced a perfect arc through the air, and then, at an unimaginable angle, he stabbed directly toward Gu Junqing's heart. At this moment, the entire battlefield seemed to freeze in place. Even Dao Tianyan halted his attack, a trace of excitement surfacing on his face. Many of the spectators watching from afar had not anticipated this sudden turn of events. Ji Hanying, in particular, who had been following the fight closely every second, instantly covered her mouth in disbelief at everything she was seeing. He's pierced him, so what if he's stronger than me? As the blade radiance in his hand sliced through the clothing of the man before him, a surge of excitement washed over the Killing Emperor's heart. He hadn't felt this kind of sense of accomplishment in a long time. Through countless years of assassination training, the threshold of his heart had long since been raised to an infinite height. No matter what happened, very few things could move him emotionally. Only assassinating experts far superior to himself held the qualification to bring him pleasure. It was just like back when he was a grandmaster, spending 3 days and 3 nights without sleep lying in ambush in the snowfield until he finally assassinated a Divine Realm enemy to death. That thrilling and exhilarating sensation filled the Killing Emperor with incomparable pleasure. If not for this feeling, given his net worth, he would have quit this line of work long ago. Scritch, scritch, scritch. A nausea-inducing scraping noise suddenly rang out through the air. The Killing Emperor's slightly upturned lips instantly froze on his face. What the fuck? He couldn't even pierce him. A powerful wave of energy suddenly erupted from Gu Junqing's body. The Killing Emperor felt an irresistible force hit him, and his body was instantly blasted backward, crashing heavily into the sea. Not bad. You actually managed to do something Dao Tianyan couldn't. You almost managed to injure me. Gu Junqing glanced with mild surprise at the faint white mark on his chest. As expected of the helper you found, he truly is extraordinary, Gu Junqing said calmly, addressing Dao Tianyan with an affirmative tone. The Killing Emperor scrambled up from the sea surface in a disheveled state, a dull ache still lingering in his chest, the lingering traces of injuries inflicted by Gu Junqing's energy wave. His eyes widened as he stared fixedly at Gu Junqing, his heart filled with terror and doubt. He had clearly stabbed Gu Junqing right in the chest, yet he couldn't even break Gu Junqing's defense. How on earth was anyone supposed to fight this? Chapter 1223. When the killing emperor saw that his single strike couldn't even break through the defense, he was completely dumbfounded. It wasn't as if physical training masters didn't exist in this world. In the study of martial arts attack and defense, there were traditionally three methods of practice: mental refinement, material refinement, and physical refinement, collectively known as the three refinements. Mental refinement meant training the void, understanding the void, and using the void, while material refinement meant training substance, mastering substance, and using substance. Physical refinement meant training the body, hardening the body, and using the body, with these three different cultivation methods ultimately leading to three distinct realms. As a divine realm expert, one could not only easily dodge bullets, but even the chi walls generated by stirring up true chi could not be broken by ordinary firearms or sniper rifles. However, relying purely on the physical body to withstand them was another matter. Ordinary firearms were manageable. Yet to withstand the lethality and speed of a sniper rifle purely, with raw flesh and blood, meant a strength that was simply unimaginable. In any case, he couldn't do it himself, and he could only surmise that such people were inevitably physical training grandmasters or master-level powerhouses. He even suspected that only someone who had achieved physical refinement at the divine realm could pull it off. Yet how could the power of his single strike be compared to any sniper rifle? That was the power of all his true essence fused into a single point, released instantaneously in a single thrust. He could pierce straight through several meters of steel plates with it, yet he couldn't even penetrate Gu Junqing's skin. How could this be possible? Leave aside the killing emperor, even Dao Tianyan stared at Gu Junqing with an incomprehensible gaze. Was this truly a physical body that a human could cultivate? Having experienced a great deal, the killing emperor quickly calmed down. He knew that the situation was unsalvageable, and this humanoid monster was simply not something he could resolve. Unless the opponent stood completely still and let him hit them, how on earth had Dao Tianyan managed to drive back such a monster? A sudden shock rippled through the killing emperor's heart, and an indescribable terror spread through his entire body. Could it be that he was just fishing him out into the open? With that thought flashing through his mind, he could no longer sit still. Having originally harbored the plan to flee thousands of miles away instantly if a single strike failed, he now threw all caution to the wind. Almost the exact moment he was blasted backward, he immediately spun around and fled toward the open sea. When he came to the Xia country this time, he had originally driven a high-powered yacht. As long as he reached the yacht's location, he would immediately head out to sea and never return to the Xia country again. Whatever Dao Tianyan or Lin Xue were, he no longer cared about any of it. Since you've already come, why bother leaving? Gu Junqing's leisurely voice drifted into the killing emperor's ears. This voice scared the killing emperor out of his wits, causing him to sprint across the sea without daring to pause for even a single second. Abyssal soul-devouring, heavens-bearing feast. A grand, ruthless voice rang out from behind him. The killing emperor could clearly feel the oppressive threat of death, his heartbeat accelerating instantly as sweat poured down like rain. He ran forward in a blind panic, churning up a white water trail dozens of meters long across the entire sea surface. He sliced through the water like an icebreaker, kicking up massive waves as he only wanted to get a little further away from Gu Junqing. The killing emperor couldn't sense it himself, but Dao Tianyan, standing not far away, could see it clearly. The mysterious black energy that had swallowed his 10 dragons, incinerating the heavens just moments ago, was slowly opening up right in front of the killing emperor. It looked like a giant mouth slowly gaping wide open, waiting for the prey to throw itself into the trap. Don't go there, Dao Tianyan roared frantically, wanting to pull the killing emperor back. But how could the panic-stricken killing emperor care about Dao Tianyan behind him at a time like this? It was already a miracle he wasn't turning around to fight Dao Tianyan to the death. Had he known beforehand that the monster he was up against couldn't even be scratched by his full-strength strike, he might as well have died back then. Dao Tianyan watched helplessly as the killing emperor's speeding figure slammed straight into that patch of black energy. Afterwards, the black energy slowly vanished. Before it disappeared, he fancied he could hear the sound of bones being chewed, and a sigh of absolute satisfaction coming from within that black energy. Chapter 1224. Watching the black energy slowly vanish from the air while the killing emperor, who had just rushed inside, was completely gone, down to his very bones, Dao Tianyan shifted his gaze toward Gu Junqing in shock and utter bewilderment. After a moment, he managed to calm down, staring at Gu Junqing through gritted teeth. What kind of demonic cultivation technique is this? When Gu Junqing had used this technique to swallow his moves earlier, he hadn't seen it clearly and assumed it was merely a coincidence. Yet now, watching a person vanish right before his eyes, no matter how worldly Dao Tianyan was, he found it impossible to remain calm. That utterly evil power, which felt like his natural predator, set shivers coursing through him. He knew that even if it were him, he would hardly be spared if Gu Junqing truly unleashed that kind of power. Furthermore, he had already employed a peculiar technique taught by his master. It allowed him to erupt with strength several tens of percent higher than usual, even doubling his power. Yet even so, he was still no match for Gu Junqing, and the man even had the leisure to eliminate the killing emperor first. This realization filled Dao Tianyan, who had always been arrogant and believed himself #1 in the world, with a surge of jealousy, unwillingness, and rage. It shouldn't be like this, Dao Tianyan roared inwardly. When he and the killing emperor ambushed Gu Junqing this time, he had been full of ambition. At first, he even felt that he wouldn't even need to make a move, as the killing emperor alone could solve Gu Junqing. Yet he never imagined it would end in such a bleak outcome. So what if it's a demonic technique? Besides, why would I explain any of this to you? Gu Junqing's gaze was indifferent, his expression cold and arrogant. Facing those indifferent eyes, a blazing fury ignited deep within Dao Tianyang's heart. He would not fear, nor would he cower, so what if it meant death? Gu Junqing's dismissive attitude was the root cause of his anger. How on earth did you discover the killing emperor? Dao Tianyang asked coldly, still harboring many questions in his heart. The killing emperor had hidden himself exceptionally well. Even though Dao Tianyang knew the man was lurking nearby, he hadn't spotted a trace of him before the strike. Yet Gu Junqing had acted as if he knew beforehand. Just because you couldn't find him doesn't mean I couldn't. Gu Junqing offered no explanation, speaking in an indifferent tone. Gu Junqing, do you think your power is enough to let you ignore everything? Dao Tianyang said through gritted teeth, his voice filled with anger and unwillingness. With a flicker of his body, a powerful force erupted instantly, distorting the surrounding air as if warping reality itself. Today, I will let you know that even if you possess this demonic technique, it doesn't mean you can place yourself above everything else. Dao Tianyang roared. Gu Junqing watched Dao Tianyang's transformation with amused interest. One had to admit, this truly was a child of fortune. Even when driven to such a near-desperate impasse, he could still muster such strength. He was still capable of erupting with such formidable power. However, Dao Tianyang's next move made Gu Junqing find it somewhat comical. Instead of choosing to fight him to the death after gathering all his true qi, Dao Tianyang chose to turn around and flee at top speed. Ding. Host has frontally defeated child of fortune Dao Tianyang, plundered 500 points of luck value, host villain luck value plus 500, host villain points plus 50,000. Ding. Dao Tianyang's fortune conditions are sufficient for the host to plant the demonic seed of the heart. Shall it be rooted? Yes. Accompanied by a slightly strange look in Gu Junqing's eyes, a seed quietly sprouted within Dao Tianyang's heart. Chapter 1225. With a sharp whistle, Dao Tianyang's figure shot away from Gu Junqing like a loose arrow in the blink of an eye. He comforted himself in his heart that he wasn't actually afraid of Gu Junqing. It was mainly because if he died, his sisters would completely fall into the clutches of Gu Junqing's demonic claws. He just knew that this insidious villain Gu Junqing was not simple, and he must have practiced some kind of demonic cultivation technique. If his sisters fell into Gu Junqing's hands, they would definitely be drained to death. Therefore, he absolutely could not die here. Even if he had to die, at the very worst he had to take this bastard Gu Junqing down with him in a mutual destruction trade. Gu Junqing, I will let you off this time, and you are not allowed to make a move against my sisters, or else I won't spare you next time. Mustering his remaining true qi, Dao Tianyang projected his voice far into Gu Junqing's ears before turning and leaving without looking back. It wasn't until he had run a very long distance that he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Yet he failed to notice that a black seed had already been quietly planted deep within his body by Gu Junqing. It was simply waiting for the day it would sprout and bear fruit. Gu Junqing stared into Dao Tianyang's departing back with deep, dark eyes. He did not give chase. This time, he never had the intention of directly killing Dao Tianyang from the start. Although a large portion of Dao Tianyang's fortune had been plundered this time, there was still plenty of potential left to mine from him. Such a prime crop still needed to be properly utilized. Furthermore, Ji Haining and Lu Qingyi were watching the battle from afar. Although they claimed not to care, if they were to witness Gu Junqing slaughtering Dao Tianyang with their own eyes, their hearts would undoubtedly feel immensely distressed. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Gu Junqing couldn't be bothered to chase after Dao Tianyang. He directly planted the demonic seed of the heart inside him, making it convenient to harvest him directly in the future. At the same time, Gu Junqing began to review the performance of this battle. Abyssal Soul Devouring, Heaven's Bearing Feast was a spell from his heaven-swallowing demonic art. This spell not only possessed the ability to devour the enemy's energy, but once he reached the next realm, it would even allow him to absorb the spiritual qi and fortune between heaven and earth. It was enough to provide him with powerful energy and cultivation support during combat. Just imagine, energy attacks unleashed by others not only failed to cause him any harm, but could even become nourishment for him. What a terrifying thing that was when facing an enemy. However, this also required the strength to suppress the opponent, or be roughly on par with them. Otherwise, not only would he fail to swallow the opponent's energy, but there was also the risk of being directly blown apart from overextension. Meanwhile, the demonic seed of the heart was a mental cultivation method that viewed all things in the universe as fluctuations, where even a single blade of grass or a tree represented a form of wave. The true qi of ordinary martial artists was also a fluctuation, whereas the true qi he cultivated at the foundation establishment or divine realm stage was a much higher tier and finer fluctuation capable of fusing with human consciousness. The demonic seed itself was a fluctuation that transcended life and death, thus allowing it to accomplish what ordinary people could not. He could directly plant the demonic seed deep within Dao Tianyang's body, gradually draining his nourishment, energy, life essence, and so on, transforming all of it into pure true qi that could be transferred without any side effects. Furthermore, as Dao Tianyang grew stronger himself, his demonic seed would likewise grow step by step. It was just like a leech latched onto a person's body, you might only realize it once your vital essence and energy had been completely sucked dry. When the final time for harvest arrived, he could directly devour him down to the last drop. In this world, if he didn't want to die, he had no choice but to let others die instead. Especially these children of fortune who opposed him. Using such methods was not the least bit excessive. Chapter 1226. Are those godlike people done fighting yet? I have no idea. Luckily the captain had sense and ran away, keeping us far away from them, or I'd be worried they'd attack us. After all, those people possessed the power to overturn rivers and seas. What would they do if those beings took a dislike to them and crushed them like ants? They even felt that the colossal cruise ship beneath them probably couldn't withstand a fight between those two. The place where Gu Junqing, Dao Tianyan, and the others fought was extremely far from the cruise ship. During the battle, when Ji Haining saw that Gu Junqing had completely gained the upper hand, she intentionally had the captain steer the cruise ship far away to prevent Gu Junqing's identity from being exposed. This meant that anyone who had been continuously paying attention to the battle could no longer see it. However, the incident still caused a sensation throughout the entire cruise ship. The whole affair spread like a plague, and driven by unknown forces, it caused an uproar across the entire internet. Holy shit, is someone really cultivating immortality behind my back? It's definitely photoshopped. Photos of supernatural phenomena are always so blurry you can't even recognize your own mother. You guys just don't understand. These are martial artists, and they actually exist in reality. I once saw a person knock down a tiger with a single punch. Wudeo practitioners? I'm an immortal then. Are you expecting us to believe you can slide tackle a tiger to death, or that someone can kill one with a single punch? Hey, do you know you're breaking the law? Tigers are national first-class protected animals, and you dare slide tackle one to death. I'm calling the police, you better turn yourself in. Haha, I believe you could slide tackle a tiger until it's 30% full. Discussions online were blazing hot, but almost no ordinary people believed it was real. Several people floating on the sea and fighting, causing monstrous waves. Why didn't they go fight in the sky? However, aside from netizens, the martial arts world took notice as well. The cruise ship didn't just carry passengers, it also held a few undiscovered and uncleared assassins. News of the Divine Realm duel, the defeat of the Azure King, and the disappearance and suspected death of the killing emperor swept through the Xia country's martial arts world like a hurricane. It spread outward at an extremely fast pace, reaching even the dark world of foreign regions. As the Azure King who shook the entire dark world, Dao Tianyan vaguely held the title of the #1 Divine Realm expert in the dark underworld. Top leaders of dark organizations like international mercenaries and the Dark Titans had all been defeated by him, submitting completely to his might as the Azure King. Then there was the Killing Emperor, another Divine Realm expert who dominated the entire dark world. Yet these two Divine Realm experts, who enjoyed global prestige, ended up in complete defeat, one fleeing in the duel, and the other dying directly at the hands of a youth under 20 years old. This was simply too shocking. Gu Junqing's identity had already been spread abroad, and almost every leader of the dark world stamped his photo with a "Do Not Provoke" title. In truth, there were very few Divine Realm experts in the entire world to begin with. This was especially true for such transcendent Divine Realm powerhouses. Some even suspected whether Gu Junqing had already surpassed the Divine Realm. Of course, this news wasn't accepted by the majority, because if he had truly surpassed the Divine Realm, he wouldn't be so obscure. A powerhouse who surpassed the Divine Realm was universally recognized as a single person capable of standing against an entire nation. They could even suppress the entire world without any problem. However, no one could refute that Gu Junqing was likely one of the strongest Divine Realm experts of the current era. After all, he had climbed to the top by stepping over the Azure King, previously recognized as one of the strongest experts alive. Chapter 1227. The number of people paying attention to the epic battle between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan grew rapidly. After all, that dazzling combat looked straight out of special effects, making it entirely too eye-catching. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Soon, the viewer count broke through 100,000, shooting upward like a rocket. In the digital age, information spread like a plague, traveling from one person to 10, and 10 to 100. Before various governments could react, these photos and videos spread across the screens of millions at lightning speed. Most people simply refused to believe it. This was a scientific era, after all, and supernatural phenomena couldn't possibly exist. Yet there was also a faction of people who believed it without a shadow of a doubt. Once Gu Junqing learned of these events, he couldn't be bothered to pay them much attention. He knew that even if this matter spread, its trending status would definitely be suppressed, or the public's focus would be diverted through other means. Martial artists breaking laws with force remained forbidden. Since the heavens had not yet shown signs of a massive upheaval, or at least not a complete one, the Xia country would never allow martial arts to spread unchecked throughout society, limiting news of Gu Junqing to elite circles. Naturally, plenty of observant individuals would still take notice, potentially sparking a trend of learning martial arts. And that had a massive connection to Gu Junqing. By the time he quietly returned to the cruise ship, several warships and helicopters had already appeared not far away. However, to avoid causing another uproar among the passengers, they merely cruised at a short distance while pursuing Dao Tianyan, the Azure King. Seeing Gu Junqing board the ship, Ji Haining immediately hurried forward to meet him. Her graceful, curvaceous figure looked like a masterpiece meticulously sculpted by the heavens. Years of martial arts training left her body completely free of excess fat. As she walked lightly, swaying like a gentle willow with glossy dark hair and snow-white skin, she possessed an allure that could topple nations. Ji Haining cast a complex glance at Gu Junqing. Having decent martial arts skills herself, she had naturally seen the battle between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan crystal clear, even catching the moment when the killing emperor launched his sneak attack. Although she felt some confusion over how Gu Junqing defeated the combined might of Dao Tianyan and the killing emperor, she chose not to ask after a moment of thought. Everyone possessed their own secrets, especially Gu Junqing. Even Dao Tianyan, who constantly had their names on his lips and claimed he would give everything for them. Hadn't he failed to disclose his true identity to them beforehand? Thank you, Ji Haining said to Gu Junqing with a trace of deep emotion in her expression. Since Gu Junqing clearly held victory in his grasp yet chose to spare Dao Tianyan in the end, she believed he had done so out of consideration for how she and her sisters would feel. I said I'd let him off this time, but if there's a next time. Gu Junqing waved his hand dismissively and then said with a smile. Naturally, he hadn't spared Dao Tianyan for her sake, as his primary goal was to test out his own cultivation technique. If it succeeded, the benefits would far surpass simply letting a child of fortune die. Furthermore, it would assist in his subsequent schemes for universal martial arts cultivation. A dark hue flickered deep within Gu Junqing's eyes. Even though the Xia country forbade it, and most nations across the world prohibited a thriving martial arts society, he simply didn't care about such restrictions. Although spiritual qi showed signs of recovery, it still fell far short of what he needed to break through to the next realm. After all, his foundational base was so rock-solid that even he himself found it staggering. However, he wouldn't explain these intricate details to Ji Haining. Letting her hold onto her misunderstanding and deepening her favorable impression of him by another layer was an even better outcome. Chapter 1228. Next time, deal with him however you like, and I won't interfere anymore. Ji Haining nodded upon hearing this. In fact, she wanted to say that there was no need to care even this time. After all, Dao Tianyan had concealed such a terrifying identity. He was the Azure King. She had dealt extensively with forces in the dark world, and was herself ranked second on the assassin organization's hit list. She naturally knew the strength and weight behind the title of the Azure King. If Gu Junqing had held back against Dao Tianyan out of consideration for them, and caused casualties later on, she would never forgive herself for the rest of her life. Furthermore, Dao Tianyan had actually dared to collude with another person to launch a joint attack against Gu Junqing. This made Ji Haining's anger soar into the skies. Right, who was that person who suddenly attacked you halfway through? Ji Haining suddenly asked Gu Junqing with a solemn expression. At the time, the distance was too far, and the speed was too fast, so she could only make out a rough figure. Yet she always felt that slender figure looked somewhat familiar. I haven't seen him before, but from what I heard, his name seemed to be the Killing Emperor or something. Gu Junqing thought about it for a moment before speaking. For a minor character who couldn't even pierce his skin, even if he were a divine realm expert, Gu Junqing couldn't be bothered to remember his name. What? The Killing Emperor? Hearing this, Ji Haining's willow eyebrows instantly shot up, and flames seemed to burn within her eyes. Although she ranked second on the hit list, she had a deeply rooted feud with the Killing Emperor, who ranked first. She had previously had several escort missions similar to protecting Lin Xue, this time ruined by the Killing Emperor. There were even several national-level talents among them. In order to get Eagle Country to agree to let these talents return home, Xia Country had already paid a massive price, yet unexpectedly, they were assassinated halfway by that old bastard, the Killing Emperor. How could this not fill the always dedicated Ji Haining with a hatred carved into her very bones? Yet Dao Tianyan had actually cooperated with such a person. Right now, Ji Haining even wished she could personally hack Dao Tianyan to pieces with her own hands. Thinking that the Killing Emperor's corpse might already be feeding the sharks, Ji Haining felt a sense of gratification, as if a great revenge had been fulfilled. Gu Junqing, are you hurt? Just as Ji Haining and Gu Junqing finished chatting, Lu Qingyi hurried over, her small face filled with anxiety. She had just gone to comfort a few of her employees, which was why she hadn't followed Ji Haining over immediately. Running over lightly, Lu Qingyi's beautiful hair drifted slightly, and her jade arms, like snowy lotus roots, appeared as white as pure jade and fine porcelain against her sleeveless dark blue dress, gleaming with a faint light. With a slender figure and a noble bearing, she possessed a truly refined, elegant, and otherworldly temperament, fully living up to her reputation as the top diva. Moreover, after a night of wild indulgence with Gu Junqing last night, her current appearance carried an extra hint of allure, resembling a goddess of breathtaking beauty. I almost got hurt. If some little vixen hadn't insisted so much last night, I almost would have been sucked dry, and fighting wouldn't have been this difficult now. Seeing Lu Qingyi's anxious expression, Gu Junqing couldn't help letting out a sigh. Lu Qingyi's pretty face blushed, and she hurriedly glanced at her second sister's expression. Finding nothing amiss, she glared fiercely at Gu Junqing. How can you still be joking at a time like this? After the two of them bantered, Gu Junqing briefly recounted the process of the fight just now. The two women listened extremely attentively. When mentioning how he had injured Dao Tianyan and forced him to flee, Gu Junqing deliberately observed the expressions of the two women, and found that neither of their expressions showed any abnormality. He knew then that Dao Tianyan truly no longer held any position in their hearts. Chapter 1229. Although Gu Junqing described it simply, both Lu Qingyi and Ji Haining listened with the utmost attention. Lu Qingyi, in particular, felt her heart surging with excitement as she listened. She wished she could transform into Gu Junqing herself, striking down Dao Tianyan with her fists and kicking away the killing emperor. Ji Haining, however, was different from Lu Qingyi. She was no weakling, possessing strength that reached the Grandmaster tier. Therefore, she could clearly see just how overwhelming Gu Junqing's advantage truly was. While battling Dao Tianyan, he had managed to instantly dispatch the killing emperor within just a few moves. She even felt that Gu Junqing had simply chosen not to go all out against Dao Tianyan from the start. Otherwise finishing him off would have taken only a few strikes. She could only guess that Gu Junqing did this to save Dao Tianyan from total humiliation, and to give him a chance to turn over a new leaf, sparing her and her sisters from heartache. Ji Haining simply felt that Gu Junqing was far too kind, or perhaps not kind, but rather too deeply fond of their group of sisters. In an instant, 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, filling her heart with overwhelming emotion. Yet amidst this deep emotion, a faint sense of unease lingered within her. Tianyan. Dao Tianyan is the type to hold grudges over the smallest slights. What if he retaliates against you after you let him go? Or what if he goes after your family? Worry filled Ji Haining's eyes. Gu Junqing had let Dao Tianyan off this time, but Dao Tianyan might not necessarily appreciate the gesture. What should they do if Dao Tianyan decided to exact revenge? Exactly. Why didn't you just finish him off once and for all? Or at least cripple him so he could live as an ordinary person? Lu Qingyi furrowed her brows upon hearing Ji Haining's words. After last night, Lu Qingyi's heart had completely tilted toward Gu Junqing. Never mind Dao Tianyan. Right now, she would even be willing to sell out her own sisters just a little bit for him. He still has some connection to you all after all. Even if he's just an adopted brother, isn't there still a bond of affection there? Gu Junqing spoke with a righteous and awe-inspiring air. Then his expression quickly shifted into tenderness. I could have dealt with him, but I couldn't bear to see you two heartbroken. That deep affection completely plunged the two women into a daze of infatuation. Having tasted forbidden fruit for the first time last night, Lu Qingyi felt her heart thumping wildly at the sight of her lover acting so deeply affectionate toward her. Like a fledgling bird throwing itself into an embrace, she leaped straight into Gu Junqing's arms, leaning against his broad chest as she listened to his slow, powerful heartbeat. Her mind involuntarily recalled Gu Junqing's well-proportioned, slender figure before undressing last night, and those incredibly strong, thick, and solid shoulders afterward, leaving Lu Qingyi thoroughly infatuated. Her tender, delicate hand, which had originally been resting on Gu Junqing's chest, couldn't help but roam up and down. It was as if she were reminiscing about that intoxicating night. Seeing her younger sister act this way, Ji Haining's gaze couldn't help but reveal a trace of complexity. If it had been just a few days ago, she never could have imagined that this younger sister of hers, who had always treated men like raging floods or fierce beasts, viewing them with utter disdain, if not outright disgust, would one day lean against a man with such infatuated sweetness, just like those affectionate couples on the street. Ahem, second sister. Third sister has a fever and needs an injection. I also got injured just now and urgently need treatment, so please take charge of the cleanup while I take third sister away for her shot. Gu Junqing gave a light cough, speaking with a righteous air. Without waiting for Ji Haining to react, he directly picked Lu Qingyi up, making her spread her slender jade legs like a koala, and wrap them around his waist as he strode toward his room in a few steps. Hey! Ji Haining widened her eyes, wanting to call the two of them back. But seeing that neither Gu Junqing nor Lu Qingyi looked back, she could only lower her hands in helpless resignation. Chapter 1230. Dao Tianyan pressed one hand against a sunken indentation on his chest, the wound inflicted by Gu Junqing, which was still continuously bleeding. Given that his cultivation had already reached the divine realm, and his physical body was no longer mortal, ordinary injuries should have healed long ago. However, a wisp of golden true qi remained coiled and flowing within the wound. It was precisely this residual true qi left by Gu Junqing that caused his wound to linger without healing. He desperately wanted to sit cross-legged right now to refine the residual true qi and recover from his injuries. Yet, fearing that Gu Junqing might catch up, he could only force his breath together and dash across the sea while blood spilled from the corners of his mouth. Drip by drip, blood fell onto the surface of the sea, attracting top-tier predators from the deep, dark depths of the ocean. With a casual downward palm strike, Dao Tianyan conjured a scorching true qi imprint that materialized out of thin air and shot straight into the water. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Not even seawater could block Dao Tianyan's scorching true qi, causing it to steam away and strike a great white shark directly, without the slightest obstruction. A moment later, a dead great white shark floated up to the surface of the sea. Yet such slaughter could not calm his state of mind. His heart remained filled with boundless anger and unwillingness. He had never imagined that the gap in strength between himself and Gu Junqing would be so vast. Right now, he felt like a failed clown. No matter who he lost to, he refused to lose to Gu Junqing. But this bastard must have practiced some kind of evil martial art, That black energy is just too dangerous. Dao Tianyan narrowed his eyes and thought to himself. The moment Gu Junqing unleashed that type of black energy, every hair on his body had stood on end. It was a kind of energy that seemed to evoke terror from the very depths of his soul. Could it be that my sisters were controlled and brainwashed by Gu Junqing's evil energy? Is that why they favor him more and even do those kinds of things with him? Suddenly, a thought struck Dao Tianyan, and deep contemplation appeared in his eyes. If he didn't think this way, he felt his soul would completely collapse. The meaning of his entire life was tied to his sisters. If he lost them, he wouldn't know why he should strive, and his future and direction would become nothing more than a blur. Only his sisters were the meaning of his life. Yet simply thinking about how more than one sister had already engaged in physical relations with Gu Junqing made his heart burn with hidden hatred. Please immediately cease your actions. I repeat, please immediately cease your actions. Just as Dao Tianyan was lost in thought and slowing down, 2 military helicopters suddenly flew into the sky without him even noticing. This was the military of the Xia country making its appearance. Holy shit, can someone really walk on water? Damn it, I thought the higher-ups were just messing with us. How could anyone fight on the sea surface? I didn't expect it to be real. Dao Tianyan hovered over the boundless ocean, looking like a tiny floating marker. If it weren't for the radar equipped on their aircraft discovering abnormal signals, the military truly wouldn't have found his existence. At this moment, the soldiers on the aircraft looked at each other in dismay, unable to believe that such people truly existed. Yet they felt no fear. Their well-trained discipline and the weapons in their hands gave them confidence even when facing the unknown. The helicopter's rotor blades whipped Dao Tianyan's clothes into a frantic flap. Yet Dao Tianyan merely glanced at them and paid them no further heed. After entering the divine realm, apart from high hypersonic missiles or similar weaponry, almost nothing else posed any threat to him. Please cease your actions. Bang! Seeing that Dao Tianyan paid no attention, a soldier fired a warning shot. However, fearing he might kill the man, he aimed only at Dao Tianyan's leg. To the utter astonishment of everyone on the aircraft, however, the bullet stopped several meters away from Dao Tianyan, colliding with an invisible barrier of qi, and suspending itself mid-air, without harming him in the slightest. Holy shit. Chapter 1231. Holy shit. The soldiers widened their mouths in shock when they saw their teammates' bullets failing to get close to Dao Tianyan. Before the capture operation, they had received orders stating that their target this time was an extremely terrifying existence. Therefore, once the target was spotted, they were to open fire immediately without showing any mercy. These soldiers initially thought it was making a mountain out of a molehill. After all, given their weapons, even someone with supernatural abilities would still have to kneel. How could any carbon-based life form possibly block 7.62 rounds? Yet they never expected that their gunfire couldn't even pierce his defense. This truly was a monster, a superhuman monster. Anger flashed in Dao Tianyan's eyes. Originally, he hadn't planned to provoke the Xia country's military, since the Xia country was a major power of the current era, and even a divine realm expert had to avoid its sharp edge. But now that the other party had fired first, they couldn't blame him for retaliating. Tat tat tat. By this time, the military also knew they could no longer underestimate these martial artists with supernatural powers. The heavy machine guns mounted on the military helicopters finally began to fire. The destructive power of these heavy machine guns far exceeded ordinary rifles, ranking just below the autocannons on the helicopters, and they were even equipped with armor-piercing rounds of immense lethality. A few rounds were enough to easily cut a person in half at the waist. Even a grandmaster taking a single hit would instantly suffer severe injuries and a drastic drop in combat effectiveness. Dozens of narrow streaks of light spat flames, sweeping toward Dao Tianyan like long, fiery tongues. Dao Tianyan's expression shifted slightly. For a divine realm expert to combat a military force, they had to rely on peerless mobility. If they were located in the city center, using such heavy weaponry would be out of the question. Otherwise, a few stray bullets or missiles could easily cause massive casualties. Furthermore, cities were filled with towering skyscrapers, making it effortless for a divine realm expert to find places to take cover. Therefore, even superpowers generally avoided provoking divine realm experts. Yet out here on the boundless ocean, countering this kind of heavy weaponry firepower was no simple task. However, Dao Tianyan was a divine realm expert after all. Even with his severe injuries, his agility was not something heavy machine guns could easily track and shoot. With a light tap against a surging wave on the sea surface, his entire body seemed to step onto an invisible fulcrum. In a split second, his speed skyrocketed to a level barely visible to the naked eye as he leaped upward. Because they had previously wanted to make Dao Tianyan lower his resistance, the helicopters hadn't flown very high. Spanning a mere dozen or 20 meters, Dao Tianyan reached that altitude in an instant. Divine realm experts could already preliminarily break free from the influence of gravity, achieving short-distance flight. As long as they had a slight point of leverage, they could push their leaping capability to its absolute limit. The reason the divine realm was called the divine realm lay in the fact that they had already begun stepping out of the category of ordinary humans. Seeing this, the pilots in the helicopters revealed looks of shock, staring blankly at this monster leaping dozens of meters high like a flea. In all their careers, they had never witnessed such a formidable existence. Amidst their mutual glances, they could even see the cold expression directed at them by the humanoid monster opposite them. Amidst the horrified gazes of everyone, The vital energy radiating from Dao Tianyon's body abruptly caused him to pause and hover midair, as if stepping on an invisible staircase beneath his feet. Bang! With a single palm blade strike from Dao Tianyon, a blade of wind abruptly materialized in the air, accompanied by a sharp, piercing sound of tearing wind that echoed across the heavens and earth. The wind blade dragged a long white streak through the sky like a rainbow piercing the sun, shooting directly into one of the helicopters within the span of a finger snap. Under the horrified gazes of everyone across both aircraft, the thick aluminum alloy armor capable of withstanding bullet fire was pierced straight through, accompanied by grating screeches and an explosion. The entire helicopter disintegrated mid-air and crashed into the ocean, leaving the 7 or 8 personnel on board with virtually no hope of survival. Gain altitude. Gain altitude. Quick, use the rockets. Use the rockets. The people on the other helicopter shouted frantically. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A barrage of rockets fired from the external weapon racks on either side of the helicopter, launching a frantic assault toward Dao Tianyon's current hovering position. Chapter 1232. Boom. A tremendously massive explosion erupted right where Dao Tianyon had been standing, sending dust and smoke billowing in all directions while a grand shockwave rippled outward. Upon realizing that Dao Tianyon possessed astonishing speed, the military aircraft could only attempt a saturated attack. Dao Tianyon's speed was simply too fast. He could flash 10 meters away in a mere second, making it virtually impossible for them to hit him through targeted aiming alone. However, heavy weapons like rocket launchers didn't require targeted aiming at all. As long as their firepower was strong enough, they could completely shroud an entire area, making it impossible to escape no matter where you ran. Yet as they kept firing until the aircraft's ammunition was completely depleted, the smoke cleared. To their astonishment, Dao Tianyon, who should have been right at the center of the explosion, was no longer there. Where did the target go? Quick, check the radar. The personnel aboard the military aircraft had never dealt with such an opponent, causing a brief panic. There's no trace of the enemy's position on the radar. Could he have left? Just as they were filled with doubt, they suddenly felt the aircraft begin to violently shake. Several crew members couldn't even manage to stay on their feet. If anyone had been watching from the outside, they would have seen Dao Tianyon hiding directly beneath the aircraft, grabbing onto the landing gear and pulling it downward. With a few forceful pulls, the upward thrust of the aircraft turned out to be weaker than Dao Tianyon's raw physical strength. The entire helicopter was dragged down several meters out of the air by Dao Tianyon as if it were nothing more than a toy. Finally unable to withstand Dao Tianyon's terrifying strength, it plummeted straight down toward the sea. Accompanied by the condensation and release of an energy bullet from Dao Tianyon, a brilliant fireworks display seemed to instantly light up the sky. The airspace spanning a radius of over 100 meters was completely engulfed by surging shockwaves, explosive power, and flying shrapnel. Dao Tianyon gazed coldly at the wreckage of the aircraft floating on the sea, blood trickling from the corners of his mouth. Hard clashing against modern weaponry of such terrifying might was enough to blast even him into severe injuries. If he hadn't dodged the bombs in time, he, already heavily injured, definitely would have been blown to death on the spot. After eliminating these two military aircraft, he finally managed to release a tiny fraction of the suffocating frustration he felt from losing to Gu Junqing. He felt that his own strength was still quite respectable, and losing to Gu Junqing must have been because that guy practiced some kind of evil martial art. Otherwise, how could he possibly have lost to a bastard like Gu Junqing? Just then, Dao Tianyon suddenly heard several piercing screeches coming from high above, causing his expression to change drastically. Copying a diver's posture, he plummeted straight down into the sea while controlling the airflow around his body to accelerate his descent until his figure vanished from sight. The very instant he vanished beneath the sea surface, a supersonic cruise missile trailing a long plume of smoke carved a white streak through the air, rapidly spanning 78 kilometers to slam directly into the water. An immensely massive, earth-shattering roar echoed across the entire sea region, blasting waves dozens of meters up into the air. A missile of this caliber was capable of snapping an entire skyscraper right in half at the waist, leaving virtually no living creatures surviving within dozens of meters around the impact zone. If he had taken a direct hit, even a Divine Realm expert likely wouldn't have left behind a single bone. Fortunately, this was out at sea with no ships nearby, and the cruise ship carrying Gu Junqing was already God knows how far away. Otherwise, they truly wouldn't have dared to deploy such massive-scale firepower. This was precisely why modern nations feared grandmasters and Divine Realm experts, refusing to publicize these powerhouses or allow them entry into their borders. Once martial artists or superpowered individuals of this caliber appeared in densely populated cities, nearly all large-scale weaponry became unusable out of fear of causing horrific, innocent civilian casualties. It was just a pity that even under such extreme conditions, Dao Tianyon still managed to escape with his life. Upon learning of this situation, even Gu Junqing couldn't help but sigh at the heaven-defying degree of this child of fortune's luck. However, if the man couldn't even survive that, then the demonic seed of the heart he had planted would have gone to waste. Thus, Gu Junqing himself didn't know whether he should feel glad or regretful. Chapter 1233. Glancing at the report brought up by his subordinate, Gu Junqing walked into Ji Haniang's room with a heavy expression. Ji Haniang's skin was as white as snow and smooth as jade, as if a single pinch could squeeze out water. The texture of her skin, smooth and elastic like silk, radiated a faint sheen under the sunlight that made one instinctively yearn to touch it. With a breathtaking beauty, her dreamy eyes were as brilliant as starlight, intoxicating anyone who merely gazed upon them. She was a woman whose beauty made it impossible to extricate oneself. Although he had seen Ji Hanying many times, Gu Junqing was still captivated by her appearance. There was only Ji Hanying inside the room. As for Lu Qingyi, well, whatever a cream puff looked like, that was pretty much what she looked like right now. Naturally, she was not in Ji Hanying's room. Second sister, this time I guess nobody can save Dao Tianyan anymore. Gu Junqing let out a sigh and handed the internal report detailing Dao Tianyan's downing of 2 military aircraft over to Ji Hanying and Lu Qingyi. By this time, the cruise ship was gradually approaching the shore, and numerous hidden State Security Bureau personnel had even secretly boarded the vessel to investigate. Therefore, Ji Hanying could be considered to have perfectly completed her mission of escorting Lin Xue ashore. Her body had just begun to relax, but upon seeing the news concerning Dao Tianyan, her expression turned ugly once more. He actually dared to do something like this. Ji Hanying slammed her hand onto the table in fury, staring at everything on the report, with an extremely grim expression. 2 military aircraft. He actually dared to make a blatant move against them. You must know that it wasn't as if martial arts powerhouses never committed crimes in secret, but even grandmasters didn't dare to commit crimes openly, let alone a crime grave enough to be called treason. So what if he was in the divine realm? Indeed, what wouldn't he dare to do? Gu Junqing shook his head with a soft sigh. Even he hadn't expected Dao Tianyan to actually commit a matter of such magnitude, originally thinking the man would only dare to run away. It seemed his fortune was truly close to being worn out for him to do something so reckless and brainless. Gu Junqing thought to himself. Then how do you plan to handle this matter? Although Ji Hanying had clearly chosen Gu Junqing between the two of them, she still couldn't completely ignore Dao Tianyan's existence. A sense of responsibility always lingered within her heart. Naturally, it's a nationwide manhunt and capture, with multiple departments jointly cooperating with Security Department operations. The Azura Society's branch established in the Xia country has already been wiped out in one fell swoop. The Xia country hasn't faced this kind of provocation in a very long time. There is a piece of news you might not understand. Some time ago, a small unit from a neighboring country rashly crossed the border, and the Xia country wiped out 3 of their battalions within a single hour without the enemy even catching a glimpse of the Xia country's forces. Battle losses like destroying 2 military aircraft are already enough to spark a war. If it were a national entity, it might already be a case of soldiers getting lost on someone else's territory and needing to go look for them. Gu Junqing shook his head. Hearing this, Ji Hanying didn't show much surprise. Yet deep down, she still felt a sense of lament. She never expected that in just a few short days, things would undergo such massive changes. Dao Tianyan had originally just been a younger brother who grew up together with them. Right, did you know his identity all along? Ji Hanying shifted her gaze to Gu Junqing's handsome facial features and suddenly asked. That's right. Gu Junqing made no attempt to hide it, speaking with candid ease. Then why didn't you say anything? It seemed Ji Hanying hadn't expected Gu Junqing to admit it so readily, and a look of astonishment filled her eyes. What difference would it have made whether I spoke up or not? Could it be that if I had said something, he wouldn't be the Azura king anymore? Or are you saying that if I had mentioned it earlier, you sisters would have disowned him as a younger brother? Besides, I, Gu Junqing, am not the type to gossip. In any case, as long as I am around, I will never allow him to harm you. Gu Junqing looked at Ji Hanying with a gentle gaze, as if it contained 10,000 strands of tenderness, speaking in a righteous and awe-inspiring tone. There was not a shred of his usual rascally demeanor. Hearing this, Ji Hanying's eyes instantly grew as tender as water as she gently leaned into Gu Junqing's embrace. Chapter 1234. The cruise ship finally docked, and passengers on board were still discussing the battle out at sea from a few days prior. For most people, that martial arts world was absolutely mysterious, unfathomable, and magical. Quite a few people even began seeking out masters to practice martial arts, attempting to step into that incredible world. However, these matters had temporarily lost all connection to Gu Junqing. What he needed to do right now was spend time with the God of War's fiancée as early as possible and establish a good relationship with the God of War's younger sister. If he could pull both of them over to his side, it would obviously be of immense help in fleecing that border God of War. For a woman like Lin Xue whose man had been away from home for years, he, Gu Junqing, not only possessed a warm heart but could also use that warm heart to help alleviate her loneliness. After disembarking, Ji Hanying took Lu Qingyi away first, the two sisters claiming they needed to shut the door and have some private girl talk. Moreover, Gu Junqing guessed that they were probably planning to do some ideological work with the other sisters, getting them to be on guard against that 8th brother, Dao Tianyan. Gu Junqing naturally let them be. Anyway, it was impossible for them to ever leave him now. The favorability ratings of both women had already been farmed up by him to 80 or 90, the level of being devoted unto death. There was basically no need to worry about anything else. Afterwards, Lin Xue invited him to visit the Lin family estate, which played right into Gu Junqing's hands, and he gladly accepted the invitation. Lin Xue was wearing a V-neck, silver-white dress with a diamond necklace hanging around her fair neck, and a pair of black high heels on her feet, leaving her slender, straight, moist, and well-proportioned legs bare as if issuing an alluring invitation. Young Master Gu, you actually turned out to be a martial artist, and such a formidable one at that. Lin Xue looked at Gu Junqing with a face full of reverence. Hearing this, Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow. Your family shouldn't be completely ignorant of these matters, should they? I once heard my grandfather mention some things about martial artists, and my family has a few ordinary ones as well, but I've truly never seen anyone as incredible as you. The things you did made me think they were just myths and legends, Lin Xue said with a wry smile. In the past, she had simply assumed all those martial arts techniques were pure fraud. At most, they could split some bricks or beat up a few minor thugs in a street fight. Upon witnessing that battle between Gu Junqing and Dao Tianyan, she finally learned what true martial arts were all about. At the same time, she quietly dismissed certain thoughts in her heart. Putting family background aside, the gap between her and Gu Junqing was like that between a divine dragon and an ant, not to mention the numerous halos surrounding him. Every single one of them was beyond anything she could ever look up to. This caused even Lin Xue's normally extremely proud personality to involuntarily give rise to a feeling of inferiority. To be able to win the favor of such a dazzling person, what a stroke of sheer fortune that would be. Therefore, Lin Xue no longer harbored extravagant hopes for Gu Junqing's attention, and her attitude unconsciously became exceedingly respectful. There's not much difference in our ages. Don't keep using you so formally, and make me sound old. Just treat me like an ordinary friend. Seeing Lin Xue's cautious appearance, Gu Junqing's gaze couldn't help but fall upon her curvaceous figure as he spoke with a faint smile. Seeing Gu Junqing look at her so earnestly, Lin Xue's heart skipped a beat. That deep and bright gaze felt as if it could see straight through a person's heart, making it somewhat impossible for her to tear her eyes away. One of the heroines had once evaluated Gu Junqing's gaze, saying that even when he looked at a dog, he looked deeply affectionate. From this, one could easily tell the lethal impact brought by Gu Junqing's looks. Lin Xue nodded her chin slightly with a hint of shyness. Conversing and laughing along the way, the two of them quickly arrived at the Lin family villa. Chapter 1235. When the car pulled up in front of the villa, a middle-aged woman and several servants came out to greet them. The middle-aged woman was around 50 years old, yet her lifestyle seemed full of sophistication and elegance. She wore exquisite designer clothing, fashionably and appropriately matched, with carefully chosen accessories like necklaces, bracelets, and earrings all sparkling brilliantly. Clearly, she had dressed up specially upon learning of Gu Junqing's arrival. She is my mother, Lin Xue whispered from the side. Gu Junqing nodded slightly without saying much. To be honest, he had little desire to deal with someone like Lin Mother, a snobbish character clearly meant to accentuate the protagonist in the plot. In face-slapping plots, such characters constantly disparage the protagonist while elevating the villain to create initial suppression. Afterward, they intensely regret their actions once the protagonist unleashes their power to defeat the villain, delivering a satisfying thrill to the reader. Of course, although he didn't care to engage with her, it was quite a skill if she managed to infuriate the protagonist. Besides, if he happened to be the one being fawned over, accepting it wouldn't be entirely out of the question. When Lin Mother saw the luxury car drive into her villa, a flash of excitement crossed her eyes. Hearing from her daughter that a big shot was bringing her back this time, she knew she had to seize this opportunity. She had to make her daughter catch the man's attention. If her Lin family could forge a connection with him, they would truly strike it rich. She was well aware of her daughter's beauty, as her daughter's striking reputation ranked near the top across the entire capital. Understanding men thoroughly, she refused to believe any man could resist her daughter's allure. As Gu Junqing and Lin Xue stepped out of the car, Lin Mother immediately walked over with a warm smile. Mom, this is young Master Gu that I told you about. Seeing her mother enthusiastically rush forward, Lin Xue felt a bit helpless inside. Figuring her mother was about to fall back into old habits, she quickly introduced Gu Junqing to her. Welcome, welcome. We must thank young Master Gu for safely bringing my daughter back. Oh my, young Master Gu is so handsome. You simply must stay a while longer so we can properly show our gratitude. Gazing at Gu Junqing's peerlessly handsome appearance, the smile on Lin Mother's face grew even warmer. She had also roughly heard how the two of them had met from her daughter. To her, Gu Junqing helping Lin Xue escape danger was simply fate knocking at the door. With a man this handsome and exceptional, if she were 20 years younger, she would be eager to throw herself at him. Besides, her daughter was so stubborn that she had scoffed at all the scions from prominent families she had introduced. Bringing this Gu surnamed scion home this time meant she refused to believe her daughter had zero feelings for him. There's no need to be so polite. It was my absolute honor to assist Miss Lin Xue, Gu Junqing said with a wave of his hand and a polite demeanor. Out in public, he had always presented himself as gentle and courteous. Everyone who knew him praised him as a peerless gentleman among men. It was simply a pity that a portion of people constantly suspected him with conspiracy theories. Gu Junqing expressed some regret over this. Seeing Lin Mother and Gu Junqing chatting so happily, Lin Xue secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Although her mother was a bit snobbish, it was quite easy for her to charm people she favored. She hadn't forgotten the purpose of Gu Junqing coming to her house. If he became displeased, her younger sister would be in danger. Though she looked down on Yang Chen, she still deeply cherished her younger sister, whom their family had raised since childhood. If Gu Junqing vented his anger and dealt with them because of adult matters, it would undoubtedly spell disaster for both her sister and the entire Lin family. Chapter 1236. Lin Mother and Gu Junqing were getting along famously. Gu Junqing finally understood why so many villainous characters liked people like Lin Mother. She was simply too good at flattering and sweet-talking. Her sycophancy made a person feel thoroughly pleased in both body and mind. The crucial part was that her flattery was subtle and silent, feeling completely natural and effortless like a gentle spring rain. Furthermore, she never made you feel awkward, as if everything she said were absolute truth. Gu Junqing even felt a sense of astonishment toward her skills. He immediately began learning from her with an open mind. For a moment, they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Lin Xue sat off to the side, only occasionally chiming in to chat. Seeing that Gu Junqing's expression showed not a trace of displeasure, and that he was chatting happily with her mother, the heavy stone in Lin Xue's heart grew even lighter. She had only briefly introduced Gu Junqing's identity to her mother. She hadn't told Lin Mother about Gu Junqing's connection to the Xie family. However, any random identity of Gu Junqing's was enough to make her mother ecstatic. As the host, why aren't you properly entertaining your guest, especially one who did you a favor? You young people need to chat more. Seeing Lin Xue sitting quietly nearby, Lin Mother quickly nudged her and shot her a faint glare of displeasure. All right, I know, Lin Xue replied with a hint of helplessness. She understood her mother's mindset. Unlike her grandfather, Lin Mother intensely disliked Ying Chen, the betrothed who had been missing for 5 years. At Lin Mother's age, the only thing she could do was boast about her children and their partners. But Lin Xue's missing fiancé couldn't bring Lin Mother an ounce of face. It's fine, chatting with you has already benefited me immensely, Auntie. Gu Junqing waved his hand and said quite sincerely. Hearing this, Lin Mother's desire to recruit Gu Junqing as her son-in-law grew even deeper. None of those previous scions ever thought of chatting with an old woman like her, and even if they did talk, they were just perfunctory. Every single one of their eyeballs practically wanted to glue themselves onto Lin Xue. A good man like Gu Junqing was simply impossible to find even with a lantern in hand. His family background was great, his upbringing was stellar, and he looked peerlessly handsome and talented. If he could have a child with Lin Xue, she could already imagine how adorable the baby would be. Definitely 100 times better looking than the Yang family daughter. Seeing her own daughter's clueless expression, she quickly called her away. Xiaoxiu, come to the kitchen for a moment. I have something to tell you. Young Master Gu, please have a seat for a moment. Lin Xue gave Gu Junqing an apologetic look before following her mother. You looked down on the people I introduced before, so why aren't you chatting more with the one you brought back yourself? Go change into a nice outfit right now. If you don't hook this man, don't call me mom. Lin Mother said with an expression of utter frustration at her failure to live up to expectations. Mom, no matter what, I'm currently a married woman, Lin Xue said with a somewhat unhappy expression. She felt her mother was just eager to package her up and hand her over to Gu Junqing. What married woman? How many times have you even seen that fellow surnamed Yang? He disappeared on the very first day of your marriage, and it's already been 5 years. Tomorrow I'll go find someone to declare him legally dead. You're so gorgeous that anyone would pity you, and you're still a virgin. What are you afraid of? Don't feel insecure. If your mom weren't 50, I'd go after him myself and leave nothing for you. Lin Mother was genuinely exasperated by her daughter's lack of ambition. She understood her daughter very well, knowing that Lin Xue definitely had a bit of feelings for Gu Junqing. However, Lin Xue felt somewhat insecure about her married status. This was all the fault of Lin Xue's stubborn old grandfather. If he weren't already buried deep underground, she would dig him back up just to make him cancel this marriage. Chapter 1237. Yet I am unworthy of him. He is like a distant star. Though I gaze up at it, I know it is forever out of reach. Lin Xue let out a bitter laugh, her eyes noticeably dimming. Initially, she had thought she might still have a chance. After all, her appearance and figure were quite decent. They even ranked near the top across the entire capital. Yet the two women standing beside Gu Junqing possessed peerless, heavenly beauty. One of them was even Lu Qingyi, a celebrity she used to follow. Before Lu Qingyi, she felt she was nothing more than ordinary willow in autumn. Even someone as extraordinary as Lu Qingyi had completely fallen for him. Where was someone like her ever worthy of a man like Gu Junqing? Furthermore, after witnessing Gu Junqing's battle out at sea, she grew even more aware of how utterly out of reach he was. She even felt as though she and Gu Junqing belonged to entirely different species. She feared that if they slept together at night, and he failed to control his strength, she might accidentally crush her to death. Usually, you're quite proud and arrogant when facing any young scion, rejecting every single one of the men your mother introduced to you. Lin Mother was somewhat puzzled. She had indeed introduced several offspring from prominent, powerful families to Lin Xue. Among them were successful individuals worth tens or hundreds of billions, along with scions from great aristocratic clans. Yet Lin Xue looked down upon every single one of them. Yet those wealthy young masters were truly strange. Even with her daughter taking such a firm and hostile stance, they still fell for this treatment, and pursued her wave after wave. She even suspected whether her daughter's status as a married woman played a role in it. Facing Lin Mother's words, Lin Xue didn't know how to respond to her. Should she tell her that those men didn't even measure up to a single toe of Gu Junqing's? She figured that if Gu Junqing applied just a little bit of force with one toe, he could probably kick to death those scions whose bodies were hollowed out by wine and women. Anyway, you can forget about having him as a son-in-law. Just focus on how to keep him happy for now. Lin Xue sighed softly. Though she couldn't talk her mother out of it right away, she still did her best to say that line. I can tell he is very interested in you, otherwise, why would he bother paying attention to an old woman like me? I don't care, in a few days I'll go get a death certificate for that surnamed Yang piece of trash. Once the marital relationship is automatically dissolved, you are going to chase him. A man chasing a woman is like scaling a mountain, while a woman chasing a man is as thin as gauze. I'll even take you to pamper your body, so you look more vibrant and tender. Thinking about her future life of luxury, Lin Mother beamed with joy. While Lin Mother and Lin Xue were arguing, Gu Junqing had nothing to do. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly caught sight of a small shadow strolling in leisurely. Gu Junqing paused slightly and looked over. The newcomer was a little girl, around 7 or 8 years old, who clearly looked like an elementary school student wearing a uniform. The little girl had a face like a porcelain doll, with fair, tender, and translucent skin that made her look exceptionally pretty. Mister, who are you, and why are you in my house? Catching a glimpse of Gu Junqing, the little girl showed no shyness and spoke in a milky, childish voice. Mister? The signature smile that Gu Junqing always wore instantly froze on his face. His eyes narrowed slightly, carrying a trace of danger. Are you also here to go on a blind date with mommy? But you look a bit better looking than the other uncles, and I like you quite a bit. The little girl spoke to herself with the demeanor of a little adult. Yet, being young after all, she couldn't quite read the expressions on people's faces. Hey, Gu Junqing let out a cold laugh, not wanting to deal with her. What is your name? Hey, let me tell you, mommy dotes on me a lot, so you have to butter me up, mister. Seeing that this handsome uncle was ignoring her, the little girl began to purse her small face. Chapter 1238. Upon hearing this, Gu Junqing finally figured out the little girl's identity. This was likely the younger sister of that favored protagonist of Fortune. Call me older brother first. Gu Junqing narrowed his eyes slightly. Uncle, older brother, uncle. Looking at the adorable tot in front of him, Gu Junqing was almost amused to the point of anger. However, as a magnanimous adult, why should he bicker with a child? Little brother, why do you keep calling me uncle? Gu Junqing wasn't upset, and asked with a smile. The little girl had a head of short, glossy black hair that was slightly fluffy. Her large, bright eyes resembled 2 clear stars, completely untainted by worldly ugliness. Being young, she also looked somewhat like a boy. The little girl immediately widened her round, cute eyes in anger. I am a girl. Gu Junqing began a staring contest with the little girl, neither willing to back down. Hey, what is your name? Being young, the girl quickly couldn't help asking again. Hasn't anyone ever told you to state your own name first before asking someone else's? Gu Junqing said with a smile. My name is Lin Bei, the Bei from Treasure. Lin Bei rolled her eyes around before finally revealing her name. Her last name is Lin, not sharing the protagonist's surname Yang. It seemed Lin Xue truly hadn't told her about the grudges from the older generation. Moreover, according to Lin Xue, when that god of war protagonist Yang Chen left, Lin Bei was only around 1 or 2 years old, so she probably had no impression of him. Gu Junqing pondered this inwardly. I've already told you my name, why aren't you saying yours? Lin Bei said angrily with puffed up cheeks. Oh, my name is Gu Junqing. Gu Junqing didn't put on airs and said calmly. Even when squatting down, he was still much taller than the little girl in front of him. Gu Junqing. Seeming to feel the respect from the handsome man in front of her, the little girl nodded with satisfaction, muttering Gu Junqing's name under her breath. Xiao Bei, you're back. At this moment, Lin Xue and Lin Mother walked out after finishing their conversation in the kitchen. Seeing Lin Bei and Gu Junqing alone together, Lin Xue's heart began to thump anxiously. Standing next to Gu Junqing, Lin Bei looked like a little ant who could probably be crushed with a single stretch of his hand. Mommy. Seeing Lin Xue emerge, Lin Bei's eyes lit up brightly, as she quickly ran over and threw herself into Lin Xue's embrace. What mommy? Call her older sister. Hearing this, Lin Mother's expression darkened somewhat. Normally, when she heard Lin Bei call Lin Xue mommy, she would just pretend not to hear it, but she couldn't ignore it now. If this caused Gu Junqing to mistakenly think Lin Bei was Lin Xue's biological daughter, then they could forget about this marriage match entirely. She was well aware of the rules among these wealthy aristocratic families. Never mind having given birth to a child, they wouldn't even want someone who had merely dated a boyfriend and wasn't a virgin. Young Master Gu, this child was left with us by an old friend to raise. Because she has lived with us since she was little, she calls Lin Xue mommy. Lin Mother hurriedly explained to Gu Junqing. Lin Bei, call him older brother. Lin Xue was also a bit nervous. If Lin Bei left any bad impression on Gu Junqing, it might not only endanger Lin Bei herself, but could also overturn her entire Lin family in an instant. Gu Junqing, unaware of the thoughts running through Lin Xue and Lin Mother's minds, Lin Bei pouted her lips and milkily shouted the name Gu Junqing had just told her. Lin Xue and Lin Mother's expressions changed drastically on the spot, especially Lin Xue's. She truly worried that Lin Bei would provoke Gu Junqing's anger. Chapter 1239. Lin Xue was worried that Lin Bei would provoke Gu Junqing, while Lin Mother simply felt that Lin Bei was about to ruin things again. It had always been like this with Lin Bei in the past. Many of the young scions she introduced to Lin Xue had been chased off by Lin Bei. She had never liked Lin Bei very much to begin with. Now seeing Lin Bei's ill-mannered appearance, her anger flared up even more. Lin Bei wasn't actually their family's child, but rather an abandoned spawn left behind by the Yang family. The Yang family had managed to offend the Xia family, after all. Their entire clan had either gone missing or been executed, effectively wiping them out. Being able to protect this child was already a supreme act of kindness from the Lin family toward the Yangs. Even if the Yang family had bestowed great favors upon the Lin family in the past, protecting two of them had already repaid that debt. Yet this little girl showed no gratitude, needlessly bringing trouble to the Lin family and trying to ruin Lin Xue's lifelong happiness. Lin mother thought bitterly to herself. She should have just gone missing right along with her brother 5 years ago. Lin Bei, if you continue to act so ill-mannered, you're going to sleep in the doghouse tonight. Lin mother stared at Lin Bei and said coldly, "Here it comes, the classic threat of sleeping in the doghouse." Gu Junqing muttered a silent complaint in his heart. "You need to be sensible, be a good girl." Lin Xue also patted Lin Bei's head, her tone carrying a hint of sternness. Hearing this, Lin Bei pouted her lips. Seeing the little tyke's aggrieved expression, Gu Junqing couldn't help but find it somewhat amusing. She was the one being impolite, yet she still felt wronged. However, he genuinely appreciated Lin Bei's personality. Thus, he spoke up, "It's fine, there's no need to mind a child's words, and besides, I was the one who told her my name." "You told her?" Lin Xue asked in surprise. A scion of Gu Junqing's level would never casually tell others his name. When encountering people he didn't wish to acknowledge, he wouldn't even bother paying attention to them. For a random person to proactively ask for his name, getting a single glance back from him would already be lucky. I quite like Lin Bei, and I believe Lin Bei likes me too, right?" Gu Junqing looked at Lin Bei with a smiling gaze. Both Lin Xue and Lin mother were overjoyed upon hearing this. Lin Xue felt that this hurdle with Gu Junqing had been cleared, meaning not only Lin Bei, but her entire Lin family would be safe. As for Lin mother, she simply felt that Lin Bei was actually useful after all. "Why aren't you speaking up? Aren't you usually very talkative?" Lin mother glared at little Lin Bei with a somewhat stern voice. In truth, little Lin Bei herself was naturally cute and pretty like a porcelain doll, and she had stayed in the Lin family for many years. It wasn't as if she held no affection for the child in her heart. Yet whenever she thought of that older brother who had been missing for 5 years, her fury would flare up instantly. That biological brother of hers had stubbornly wasted 5 whole years of her precious daughter's youth. Did she know how she had managed to get through these past 5 years? If not for these 5 years, her daughter might already be married with children, giving her a real, cherished grandson or granddaughter. Therefore, she had shifted all her resentment toward Ying Chen entirely onto Lin Bei's head. Lin Bei glanced at Lin Xue, and upon seeing the expectant look in her eyes, she pouted her lips and could only nod in response. Watching Lin Bei's aggrieved little appearance, Gu Junqing couldn't help but curve his lips in amusement. He couldn't help reaching out to rub Lin Bei's little head. Daring not to resist, and unable to anyway, Lin Bei could only angrily grab Gu Junqing's 2 fingers on her head with her chubby little hands. "Auntie, didn't you mention earlier that she was fostered at your home by an old friend? Since they haven't come back after all these years, why don't you let me adopt her?" As soon as these words dropped, it was like a bombshell, shocking everyone present. Both Lin Xue and Lin mother froze in place, and even Lin Bei, who had been trying to pry off Gu Junqing's fingers, stared blankly at him in utter shock. Chapter 1240. Adopt. Lin mother repeated in disbelief, casting a suspicious glance toward Gu Junqing. She muttered to herself, wondering if this guy actually had a thing for kids. People always said that individuals from these grand wealthy families had eccentric tastes compared to ordinary folk. Since Lin Xue knew about the connection between Gu Junqing and Lin Bei, her thoughts ran much deeper. She leaned toward the idea that Gu Junqing still felt uneasy about Lin Bei and wanted to raise her by his side. Realizing that both of their gazes carried a strange look, Gu Junqing felt a bit helpless. Yet he understood that his request was indeed rather presumptuous. Who asks to adopt someone else's child on their very first visit? Being suspected by Lin mother of having inappropriate motives was completely normal under the circumstances. "I know it's a bit sudden, but I genuinely like this child. If possible, I hope both of you can consider it," Gu Junqing said earnestly. From their earlier chat, he knew that Lin Bei was aware of her own background, so he didn't shy away from the topic. Besides, judging by Lin Bei's current living conditions, if she wasn't having a tough time in the Lin family, she wouldn't act like a mature little adult. "I don't want to," Lin Bei said with a puffed-up face. "Why not?" Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow slightly. "I want to stay with mommy." Lin Bei grabbed onto Lin Xue's sleeve, refusing to let go. Lin Xue's eyes softened considerably. Despite having no blood relation to the child she had raised since infancy, she still loved her deeply. If the child was sent away, seeing her again wouldn't be so easy. Lin mother's eyes flickered with thought. If she could use Lin Bei to forge a connection with Gu Junqing, it wouldn't be bad even if things didn't work out between him and Lin Xue. After all, she was just a child. Even with the affection built up from raising her since youth, it still fell far short compared to the Lin family's interests. Besides, sending her to Gu Junqing's home wasn't like throwing her into a fiery pit. She would be going there to enjoy a life of luxury. Other people would beg to go, yet wouldn't even be given the chance. With this thought, Lin mother genuinely entertained the idea of letting Gu Junqing adopt Lin Bei. However, if she said that aloud, her daughter probably wouldn't agree, so she needed to come up with a clever method. "Actually, young Master Gu, you don't need to rush. If you really like Xiaobei, you can just come over to visit her more often when you're free." Lin Xue spoke in a gentle, melodious tone. Sunlight washed over her, casting a sacred, maternal aura across her figure. "Well, all right then." Gu Junqing pondered for a moment, letting go of his initial idea. Seeing Lin mother's attitude toward Lin Bei, he could tell the child didn't have it easy in the Lin family, and he had originally expected them to agree. Now it seemed he needed to build a better relationship first. Lin Bei remained silent as she watched the three adults. When she first saw Gu Junqing, she really hadn't felt any goodwill toward him. In fact, if not for his exceptionally good looks, her tone would have been even worse. She figured Gu Junqing was definitely here to snatch Lin Xue away. If Lin Xue married someone else, what would happen to her? In the entire Lin family, Lin Xue was the only one who genuinely liked her. Therefore, she always plotted to ruin things for any man who tried to take Lin Xue away. Moreover, while those men acted polite on the surface, their eyes practically glued themselves to Lin Xue. After she caused trouble, they would secretly threaten her, forbidding her from interfering with their pursuit of Lin Xue. She could never rest easy handing Lin Xue over to people like that. But what did she hear just now? The man in front of her actually wanted to adopt her. Furthermore, when the adoption fell through, the disappointment on his face didn't look fake at all. This man seemed pretty decent. Within Lin Bei's young yet sensible heart, a preliminary impression of Gu Junqing began to form. Chapter 1241. On an unnamed high mountain in the war zone, a tall figure with an ordinary face, but a cold and resolute expression quietly gazed at the stunning scenery. His heart was like jade weathered by 1,000 years of frost, radiating an unspeakable arrogance and calm. His deep eyes were like two ancient wells, calm yet reflecting the vastness and depth of 1,000 mountains and rivers. Between his brows lay an unyielding heroic spirit, as if he were conversing with the wind and thunder of heaven and earth, displaying complete fearlessness and resilience. His figure was gently wrapped in swirling clouds and mist, faintly visible as if breathing with the cosmos, and sharing the fate of the mountains and rivers. Yang Chen. At only 30 years old, he had managed to carve a bloody path out of the perilous and treacherous war zone, commanding countless famous generals and powerful troops under his banner. Ever since receiving guidance from a mysterious expert 5 years ago, he started from the bottom as a private in the war zone, rising through the ranks to become a squad leader, staff officer, commander, and finally commander-in-chief. After a decade of military life, he finally used the skulls of his enemies to build a supreme throne, earning the title of the Kailan God of War. Yet who could have imagined that someone like him was merely a profligate playboy just 5 years ago? The Yang family was a major clan in the capital, and as the son of the family head, Yang Chen was wealthy and powerful with countless beauties by his side. He owned luxury cars and mansions, looking down on countless ordinary people while lording it over them. Perhaps the heavens were punishing him for his profligacy and playfulness. Overnight, because they offended the Xie family, all of the Yang family's assets were swallowed up, and everyone in the family perished. In the end, only he and his younger sister were left surviving in this world. The horrifying shock of the Yang family's annihilation back then had become an eternal pain buried deep within Yang Chen's heart. He had harbored this hatred in his heart for 5 years, but the Xie family was powerful and could not be underestimated. Until today, now that he was exalted as the god of war, he finally had the capability to exact his revenge. Yang Chen let out a breath, murderous intent overflowing in his eyes. In the past, I was no match for you, but from now on, the tables have turned. Father, mother, watch over your son, for I will personally send every single person from the Xie family down to hell to apologize to you. Fortunately, there is Lin Xue. Thinking of the girl named Lin Xue, Yang Chen's heart instantly grew incomparably tender once again. If Lin Xue hadn't saved him and his younger sister back then, and even fostered his sister for 5 years, while giving her familial affection. Otherwise, the agony of losing his loved ones, which almost completely destroyed his sanity, would have scorched his heart day after day. Without her and Lin Bei giving him strength, he might have long since lost his sanity and motivation to move forward. Furthermore, Lin Xue was already his legally registered wife. As he was about to return home in glory and honor, he would definitely grant her endless glory and brilliance in the future. Reporting to the god of war, Miss Lin Xue has safely arrived in the capital, and the people sent by those old rivals of ours did not cause any harm to Miss Lin Xue. At this moment, a figure walked over quickly to report the gathered news to Yang Chen. They know the general trend is lost, so they merely want to retaliate against me. Yang Chen let out a cold laugh. Right now, there are barely any forces left in the entire war zone that can oppose us, so do they really think they can affect me with this? Pass down the order, wipe out all factions across the entire war zone, and kill anyone on sight. I want only my voice to be heard throughout the entire war zone. Should the remaining forces in the Xia country be wiped out together? The subordinate asked with a hint of hesitation. Did you not hear what I said? All of them. Yang Chen said coldly. Back when his Yang family was destroyed, none of these people had ever spoken up to help them. Understood. After receiving the order, the subordinate's figure suddenly vanished, clearly going to broadcast Yang Chen's command. Chapter 1242. After enjoying the exhilaration of standing atop the pinnacle once more, another subordinate immediately came forward to report. The subordinate was the person Yang Chen had dispatched to investigate the situation regarding Lin Xue, returning to brief him on everything that had transpired. God of War, the matter concerning Miss Lin Xue has been thoroughly investigated. The Xia Country Security Bureau played a significant role, and the forces involved with the cruise ship Miss Lin Xue was on were far-reaching, even involving assassin organizations, the Azura Society, and remnants of the Xia family forces. Upon hearing the name of the Xia family, Yang Chen's entire body radiated fierce internal energy. His eyes emitted a chilling glare that shocked the surrounding subordinates. This is impossible. Yang Chen frowned deeply. Over the years, to evade the pursuit of the Xia family, he had not only ventured alone into the war zone, where the Xia family's reach could not control, but he had even altered his name, living in anonymity for so long. There was no way the Xia family could still know that he was alive in this world. So why would the Xia family target Lin Xue? Could it be that they knew he was still alive? If so, wouldn't Lin Xue and his younger sister fall into grave danger? Hurry and prepare. Immediately spread the word that I am about to unify the war zone. Avoid fighting if possible, and use sheer military might to intimidate all factions. Yang Chen could no longer sit still. Originally, he had planned to return to his country after some more time, but now knowing the Xia family might have discovered his existence, he could no longer stay put. He intended to unify the war zone as early as possible, returning with a full body of honor to confront the Xia family afterward. The war zone was filled with numerous factions, and subduing them one by one would traditionally take at least another year or two. He had originally planned to take his time, befriending distant states while attacking close ones, until he had slashed through the entire war zone without sparing a single faction. Yet the current situation no longer allowed him to do so. It was virtually impossible for him to clear out the factions of the entire war zone in a short period. Therefore, he could only rely on military deterrence. At the very least, no opposing factions could be allowed to exist on the surface anymore. God of War, everyone in the war zone is a desperado. Mere military deterrence is useless, a subordinate said with a wry smile. Then launch a major campaign to eliminate all enemies in one single stroke. Yang Chen said in a solemn tone. Taking things slow was no longer viable, so he had no choice but to push forward aggressively. He would declare war on all nations and family factions in the war zone, deciding the ultimate outcome in a single battle. Yet by doing so, many of the soldiers under his command might perish. Even so, he could no longer care about that, as the safety of Lin Xue and his younger sister took precedence. He could not allow them to fall into a dangerous predicament. Right, go communicate with Xia country once more. Tell them that once I unify the war zone, I will make a trip back to Xia country. Yang Chen instructed once again. Hearing this, his subordinates all wore excited looks in their eyes. The war zone was not only populated by soldiers, but also by many exiled criminals. They had come to the war zone precisely to fight for a future and redeem themselves through meritorious service. Many people here shared a similar plight to Yang Chen. Yang Chen's words were essentially equivalent to having Xia country prepare military merits for them so they could return and receive official military ranks. Who didn't want to return home in glory and exact their revenge? Looking at the many subordinates gazing at him with hopeful anticipation, Yang Chen understood their thoughts as well. Yet if they returned early this time, everyone would inevitably have to leave. Even if they won this final battle, it would be impossible for him to take everyone away. Given the conditions of the war zone, a considerable number of people had to remain behind to garrison the area. In fact, most of the people here might never be able to return at all. Yet he could not say much else, as these soldiers had risked their lives for him over the years, and he held deep emotional bonds with them. Rest assured, everyone, once this battle is concluded and I return, I will petition for merits on behalf of each and every one of you, elevating everyone's rank by 3 levels. If any brother falls in battle, I, Yang Chen, will surely support and care for their families as if they were my own birth parents. Yang Chen proclaimed in a loud voice. Understood. We swear to give our all for the God of War. Hearing this, the subordinates beamed with joy, each and every one of them placing absolute trust in their commander-in-chief. Only Yang Chen, who had just raised his voice to boost morale, revealed a trace of complexity deep within his eyes. To stand against the Xia family, only a God of War covered in glory would stand a chance. Chapter 1243. Gu Junqing had no idea that his appearance had caused Yang Chen to accelerate his return to the country. For now, he was still leisurely staying at Lin Xue's home, slowly chatting with her about child-rearing experiences. After all, Gu Junqing was also a man who had raised children before. The two stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the ruby-red wine rippling in their wine glasses. After gently clinking glasses with Lin Xue, both of them took a light sip. Young Master Gu, you seem to really like Xiaobei. Lin Xue's tone carried a mix of confusion and unease. She truly couldn't see through a person like Gu Junqing. It wasn't like she had never met outstanding young masters and princesses from wealthy families, but there was not a single one quite like him. Even though he was a few years younger than her, his profound city-bred astuteness made him feel as fathomless and untraceable as an abyss. I know you are curious, but I harbor no ill intentions toward Lin Bei. As for why, it's simply a matter of intuition. When I look at people, I only talk about fate, and Lin Bei and I are fated, Gu Junqing said with a light chuckle, his clear eyes nonetheless feeling profoundly deep. Fated? Lin Xue didn't even know how to answer Gu Junqing. Why was he suddenly starting to talk about metaphysics out of nowhere? However, as long as she knew Gu Junqing wouldn't harm Lin Bei or vent his anger on the Lin family, it was already enough. Another reason I want to adopt her is that while you dote on her, her position in your household is rather awkward. Your mother clearly dislikes her, and Lin Bei struggles with whether to call you older sister or mommy. Gu Junqing shared some of his own thoughts. Lin Bei's current personality didn't look like that of a 6 or 7-year-old child at all. Ever since he met her, he hadn't even seen Lin Bei smile once. Her only emotional fluctuation was when he called her a boy, causing her to get angry. For a child to have already lost her smiles and emotions, one could only imagine how much impact the Lin family's environment had on her life. As for who caused Lin Bei to lose her biological parents and parental love, Gu Junqing could remain entirely righteous. What did the Xie family's actions have to do with someone surnamed Gu? I know, I'll pay attention to it. All these years I've been busy with work and haven't fulfilled my duty regarding her education. After remaining silent for a moment, Lin Xue finally spoke. She had actually done her best, but the Lin family required her management, leaving her with zero time to raise a child. Occasionally her business trips would last for several months at a time. Lin Bei could only be raised by Lin Mother, but if Lin Mother didn't hate her and could simply ignore her, that was already good enough. How could she possibly hold any deep affection for the child? Actually, there is another way to both raise her yourself and give Lin Bei the care she needs. Gu Junqing suddenly paused to build suspense. What way? Lin Xue looked at Gu Junqing with curiosity. That is for you to find a desirable husband, hand your work over to him, and you can naturally take care of the child yourself. Gu Junqing said in a joking manner. Young Master Gu, you're teasing me again. It's not that easy, and besides, I still have. Lin Xue found it somewhat amusing, but as she spoke, thinking of Yang Chen, whose body was never found dead or alive, she fell silent once more. Both Lin Bei and her marriage were like chains shackled to her body. They made her life feel somewhat suffocating. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. I just noticed why you are still calling me young Master Gu. I've told you many times to just call me by my name, or else I might actually have to hold you accountable. Seeing Lin Xue's thoughts, Gu Junqing changed the subject, speaking in a half-angry, half-joking tone. Understood, from now on I will call you Junqing. Lin Xue's eyes curved into crescent moons, and as she called out Gu Junqing's name, a blush inevitably crept across her snow-white cheeks. Clearly, she was rarely this close to any man. Even with her wedded husband, she always used rather official and formal titles. Chapter 1244. While Gu Junqing and Lin Xue were chatting, Lin Bei came pattering down the stairs wearing a pair of pajamas. Upon seeing the two of them, she merely glanced their way, without any intention of disturbing them. She walked straight over to the refrigerator and pulled the door open. After peering inside with her big eyes, she stood on her tiptoes without hesitation and stretched her little arms upward until she finally grabbed a bottle of cola. Slamming the refrigerator door shut, the little tyke unhurriedly sat down on the sofa. As she watched Gu Junqing and Lin Xue chat, she struggled to twist open the cola cap and took small sips, letting out a refreshing sigh of satisfaction. Gu Junqing couldn't help but be amused by the sight. Lin Xue, however, arched her eyebrows and scolded. I've told you before not to drink too much cola. You can only have a couple of sips. I know, why are you bothering me when you're busy flirting? Holding the cola bottle in her small hands, Lin Bei pouted after being scolded and muttered under her breath. Lin Bei, if you say things like that again, you can forget about ever watching TV. Lin Xue's face flushed red from the teasing, and in her exasperation, she stepped forward to pinch Lin Bei's cheeks. Gu Junqing couldn't help smiling warmly before placing his cup down on the table. With a polite tone, he said, it's getting late, so I'll be heading out first. Junqing, it's so late. Let me drive you, Lin Xue offered. She had already begun to view Gu Junqing as a friend, so she no longer worried about formalities with titles. Don't worry about it, I just bought a villa right next door to you, so I can just walk over. Gu Junqing waved his hand dismissively. You bought one. For a moment, even Lin Xue felt a twinge of envy at Gu Junqing's extravagant behavior. Her Lin family was hardly insignificant, with the family company boasting a market value of tens of billions. While not quite at the absolute top tier of the capital circle, they were still a prominent and respected household. Yet they weren't wealthy enough to purchase a villa worth hundreds of millions as casually as chatting about the weather. Well, your environment is pretty nice, and someone nearby happened to want to sell, so I bought it, Gu Junqing explained. Naturally, he didn't do it just for that reason. Lu Qingyi was currently preparing for a concert, and his second senior sister had been acting all mysterious lately, as if she were preparing to welcome someone important. Since neither of the two women was home, he finally had the time to build a better relationship with Lin Xue, the female protagonist. Thus, he simply bought a place right in the neighborhood. Oh, that must be Aunt Jiang's place. I heard her daughter married abroad, so she wanted to sell the house to go take care of her. It seems the owner's surname is indeed Zhang. Gu Junqing nodded in agreement. That's wonderful, we can be neighbors from now on. Although having such an overwhelming presence living right next door made Lin Xue feel a bit nervous, things were different if that presence was a friend. Therefore, Lin Xue appeared quite happy about this development. I'll be leaving then, but feel free to bring Lin Bei over to my place to play whenever you have time. Without lingering, Gu Junqing spoke casually and turned to leave. After watching him depart, the one young girl and one woman finally relaxed and returned to their room. After washing up, Lin Xue tucked Lin Bei into bed alongside her. Xiaobei, I know I haven't given you enough care and attention, but that uncle, brother, well. Lin Xue thought of how Gu Junqing was a 20-year-old adult still arguing with a 7- or 8-year-old toddler over whether to be called uncle or brother, and couldn't help smiling wryly. Remembering that she was supposed to be lecturing Lin Bei, she gave a light cough and continued. You must never harbor hostility toward him, understand? Hugging Lin Xue and feeling her warm body temperature, Lin Bei closed her eyes and gave a soft hum of agreement. After nagging a few more words, Lin Xue realized that Lin Bei had already fallen asleep beside her. A sense of relief washed over her heart. Becoming friends with Gu Junqing was clearly the best choice for now. Since they were friends now, he surely wouldn't try anything against Lin Bei anymore, right? Lost in these thoughts, Lin Xue hugged the daughter she had raised since childhood and drifted off into a deep sleep. Chapter 1245. Early the next morning, just as Lin Xue was caught off guard, Lin Bei suddenly spoke up out of nowhere. "Mommy, there's a parent-teacher meeting today, and the teacher said someone has to go." Hearing this, Lin Xue froze for a moment, her expression turning hesitant. She had only just returned to the capital, and the company wasn't solely hers. There was a huge pile of matters waiting for her to handle over there. If she failed to handle them properly, she even ran the risk of being kicked off the board of directors. Her father had died young, and her grandfather had entrusted this family business into her hands. She absolutely could not hand this family enterprise over to anyone else. "Mommy has to go to work and attend a meeting today. Can Grandma go instead?" Lin Xue's tone carried a hint of hesitation. Lin Bei was very sensible, and from Lin Xue's tone, she immediately knew that Lin Xue probably couldn't make it. Therefore she said, "It's fine. The teacher said parents don't necessarily have to go, and besides, Grandma wouldn't go anyway." Seeing that Lin Bei was expressionless while her words were full of comfort, Lin Xue couldn't help feeling a pang of heartache. She knew she hadn't given Lin Bei much care or affection. She was well aware that Lin Mother disliked, or even one could say hated, Lin Bei. Though she had tried to persuade her many times, there was nothing she could do to change Lin Mother's mind. How could someone like Lin Mother ever go attend a parent-teacher meeting for Lin Bei? Even if she begged Lin Mother to go, the woman would likely not take it seriously at all. Back when Ying Chen handed Lin Bei over to her to raise, she was only 18 or 19 years old. How could someone of that age possibly know how to raise a child? Not to mention that her time was gradually consumed by busy affairs, leaving her with even less opportunity to learn how to provide Lin Bei with love and emotional support. If not for those words from Gu Junqing, she would never have realized how long it had been since she last cared about Lin Bei's daily life. Wait, Gu Junqing? Lin Xue's heart was initially growing increasingly guilty, but when her mind landed on that name, a sudden inspiration struck her. Bei, if you don't want Grandma to go, how about we change it to someone else? Lin Bei tilted her head in confusion. So you want me to go attend the parent-teacher meeting for Lin Bei, is that it? Gu Junqing opened the villa door, looking at the pleading Lin Xue with a half-smile. "I'm terribly sorry, but I really have no other choice." Lin Xue knew she was essentially gambling here. However, she genuinely wanted Lin Bei to interact more with Gu Junqing, not necessarily expecting him to adore Lin Bei, but at least to build some mutual bond between them. Yet deep down in her heart, there was also a thought she was reluctant to admit. That was, she actually wanted to have more opportunities to spend time with Gu Junqing herself. There was no helping it, she simply felt that the man before her, with his tall, upright figure and smooth, elegant lines, was wildly handsome. Whether dressed in casual wear or a tailored suit, he effortlessly projected a unique charm. His facial features were exquisite and three-dimensional, resembling a masterpiece meticulously carved by nature. His deep eyes shone like stars in the night sky, radiating a mysterious and captivating glow. His high bridge of the nose and smooth lines added a touch of rugged masculinity and heroic spirit to his peerlessly handsome face. He was neither as effeminate and unmanly as modern pop idols, nor as rough and crude as a bulky brute, making it nearly impossible to find a single flaw anywhere on his entire body. If she could just glance at him a few more times each day, she felt her entire day's mood would brighten up. He was simply a feast for the eyes. Lin Xue, who had never considered herself someone obsessed with looks, felt for the very first time that the visual impact someone's appearance could bring was a truly wonderful thing. Sure. Chapter 1246. Sure. Gu Junqing stroked his chin and nodded in agreement. He didn't have much on his hands right now, and his monitoring of the favored protagonist, Dao Tianyan, was still ongoing. Ever since planting the demonic heart seed in Dao Tianyan, he had harbored a faint intuition regarding the fellow's location, knowing his general direction. Yet finding his exact whereabouts was not all that easy. The only thing known for sure right now was that Dao Tianyan seemed to have sneaked back into Xia country. Investigating further was still necessary to pinpoint his exact movements. Since he had nothing better to do and Lin Xue had made a personal request, he gladly accepted. Moreover, seeing the visibly reluctant look on Lin Bei's face beside Lin Xue made him agree, with even greater delight. "Then I'll leave Lin Bei in your hands. I'm off now, sweetie. Make sure to listen to your older brother." Lin Xue patted Lin Bei's little head and instructed her earnestly. Suddenly thinking of something, she looked back at Gu Junqing with a hint of apology. "Junqing, I didn't mean to take advantage of you." Lin Bei called her mommy, but since Gu Junqing insisted that Lin Bei call him older brother, wouldn't that mean she inexplicably outranked Gu Junqing by a generation? Thinking about it, she found it rather amusing, her lips trembling as she struggled to keep a straight face. Gu Junqing's lips twitched slightly as well, though this was his own fault for being overly sensitive about suddenly being called an uncle. "Got it, mommy. You should go to work nicely too." With that awkward topic passed, Lin Bei obediently nodded. For her, even though she knew in her heart that she was merely adopted, she had long since viewed Lin Xue as a maternal figure. Shortly after, the one big person and one small person watched Lin Xue leave for work. "Gu Junqing, I'm hungry." After Lin Xue left, Lin Bei seemed to shed whatever persona she had been putting on, pulling at the corner of Gu Junqing's clothes, and speaking with an expressionless face. When Lin Xue was around just now, she hadn't made any demands at all. Yet now she no longer bothered hiding it in front of Gu Junqing. Let's head out then, I'll buy you something once we get to school. Gu Junqing wasn't surprised by Lin Bei's switch at all, or rather, he had long known that this little girl's mind was completely unlike that of her peers. Even so, she was only 7 or 8 years old, so no matter how complex her thoughts were, she was still just a child. Believing that Gu Junqing needed to win her favor, she naturally voiced out her own demands. Oh. Lin Bei nodded expressionlessly. Tisk tisk, you really aren't cute. Gu Junqing let out a light chuckle and, disregarding Lin Bei's cautious gaze, bent down to gently pinch her tender little cheeks. Feeling the incomparably soft texture beneath his fingers, especially seeing Lin Bei puff up her cheeks in anger, his mood improved quite a bit. Let's go, I'll drop you off at school first. Oh right, how are your grades? I hope I'm not going to school just to get chewed out by teachers. Gu Junqing suddenly remembered something and raised an eyebrow at Lin Bei. They're all right. A trace of undisguised pride mingled within Lin Bei's flat tone. Puffing out her small chest, she clearly showed that her grades were quite decent. That's good to hear. I honestly thought you were the worst student at the bottom of the class. Gu Junqing nodded. You're the one at the bottom of the class. Lin Bei was still a child after all. Even if her mindset surpassed her peers slightly, she still cared deeply about her grades at this age, and her usually expressionless little face immediately puffed up in displeasure. This gave her a touch of lively vitality. When Gu Junqing tried to tease her further, she completely ignored him and walked alone while brooding in silent anger. The two of them quickly arrived at Lin Bei's elementary school. Chapter 1247. Capital Elementary School. A luxury car pulled up at the entrance of the elementary school, attracting quite a bit of attention. Even in a capital elementary school where prominent figures were hardly rare, it drew enough eyeballs to make people wonder which family's prince or princess was sitting inside. Gu Junqing stepped out of the car first, then looked with a headache at Lin Bei, who climbed out with grease all over her mouth. He had his subordinate buy breakfast for Lin Bei, but he hadn't expected her to eat it with grease smeared all over her face. Yet even with grease covering her mouth, the porcelain-like little girl still looked quite adorable. Why aren't you wiping your mouth? I couldn't find any tissues. Do you have any? She hadn't felt much while standing next to Gu Junqing, but after getting out and receiving numerous stares, Lin Bei grew a bit shy. She quickly tugged on Gu Junqing's clothes to ask for a tissue to wipe her mouth. Let's go. After meticulously tidying up the little girl, Gu Junqing led Lin Bei toward the school. It wasn't that Gu Junqing didn't want to hold her hand while walking, but Lin Bei was only in the 2nd grade with a height barely over a meter. If Gu Junqing, standing at 1.9 meters tall, wanted to hold her hand, Lin Bei would have to reach her arm up over her head. Finding it too tiring, Lin Bei was unwilling to let Gu Junqing hold her hand. Even when crossing the street, she simply had Gu Junqing carry her across. The elementary school environment was filled with vitality and life, resembling a colorful fairytale castle brimming with children's cheerful laughter. Stepping through the school gates, the first thing that came into view was the spacious playground. Lush trees were planted all around the playground, standing like guardian deities quietly protecting this land full of laughter. The center of the playground featured a green lawn that was soft and springy. Children ran and played freely on it, as if the entire world was their stage. Looking at it all, Gu Junqing even felt a touch of nostalgia for his own childhood. Because it was the day of the parent-teacher meeting, there were still many adults strolling around the campus with their children just like Gu Junqing. While Gu Junqing was sizing up the environment, many people were simultaneously paying attention to the combination of Gu Junqing and Lin Bei, chiefly because Gu Junqing looked extremely young, and coupled with the fact that both of their appearances were remarkably high. The parents bringing children were mostly women, so seeing a man like Gu Junqing naturally caused them to cast a few extra glances his way. Lin Bei felt somewhat irritated and regretful. She shouldn't have agreed in the first place when her mom asked Gu Junqing to come attend her parent-teacher meeting. In just this short distance from the school gate to the classroom, no fewer than 10 mothers accompanied by children had found excuses to come chat with them. Furthermore, their reasons were all bizarrely varied. Some claimed they lost their phones and asked to borrow Gu Junqing's phone for a moment, while others claimed they couldn't find their classrooms. There were even some who asked where the restroom was when the restroom was right in front of their eyes. A journey that normally took her as a child only a few minutes to walk was dragged out to over 10 minutes, and she was being annoyed to death by it. You're attracting too many bees and butterflies. I'm not satisfied. Seizing a moment when no one was coming over to strike up a conversation, Lin Bei gazed fiercely at Gu Junqing with blazing eyes and pouted. Do I need you to be satisfied? Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow. Of course. Mommy loves me so much, and if you want to chase her, you definitely won't succeed unless I'm satisfied. Lin Bei let out a soft huff, lifting her chin and puffing out her chest as she spoke with a haughty air. Is that so? Gu Junqing chuckled lightly. He was truly almost amused to laughter by Lin Bei, speaking the fiercest words in such a milky, childish voice. Bei, come over here. At this moment, another little girl of the same age was waving loudly at Lin Bei, which finally interrupted their conversation. Chapter 1248. Your friend? Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow slightly, seemingly surprised that Lin Bei actually had friends. How could this little tyke have friends while always keeping a straight face? Detecting the surprise in Gu Junqing's voice, Lin Bei expressionlessly raised her head and gave him a light slap. A child's strength wasn't even enough to scratch an itch. Gu Junqing felt the force was probably less than that of a mosquito. Yet Lin Bei's reaction made him feel a trace of vitality. At the very least, basic emotions like anger were still there. This also put Gu Junqing somewhat at ease. He held certain expectations for Lin Bei, going beyond merely milking benefits from the protagonist. Bei. Right after Gu Junqing and Lin Bei's brief interaction, the little girl who called out to Lin Bei trotted over to her side. She familiarly grabbed Lin Bei's hand, looking like a childhood friend with a close bond. "Hello, mister," the little girl politely greeted Gu Junqing. After greeting him, she quickly pulled Lin Bei aside and whispered, "Bei, is this your dad? This seems like the first time I've ever seen him come, and you've never mentioned him to me." "No," Lin Bei denied expressionlessly. She figured if she had a dad who constantly mocked his own daughter, her lifespan would surely be cut short by 20 years. "Your uncle is so handsome and mature, introduce him to me. What's his name, how old is he, and does he have a partner?" The little girl was clearly already accustomed to Lin Bei's attitude and felt no disappointment at all. Instead, she grew even more enthusiastic, eager to learn information about her uncle from Lin Bei. Lin Bei stared speechlessly at the girl of her own age. She never expected Gu Junqing's charm to radiate all the way down to this age group. If Gu Junqing really were her dad, she couldn't help wondering if this friend of hers was trying to become her stepmom. "Nini, if you ask any more questions, I'll tell Auntie not to let you watch TV anymore." Lin Bei narrowed her eyes, threatening the little girl using the exact tone Lin Xue used to threaten her. Hearing this, the little girl named Nini immediately dared not ask any more questions. She only dared to timidly steal glances at Gu Junqing while following closely behind Lin Bei step by step, resembling a little maid who had done something wrong. Gu Junqing found his own mental comparison rather amusing. Yet seeing the friendship between the two girls, Gu Junqing also felt a touch of gratification. "Sigh, why am I feeling this kind of sentiment? Could I actually be wanting to play dad?" Gu Junqing muttered inwardly. After casually exchanging pleasantries with Nini's parents, Gu Junqing led Lin Bei into the classroom. Inside the spacious classroom, many parents were introducing themselves and getting acquainted with one another. However, after Gu Junqing brought Lin Bei inside, the reaction among the children was minimal. Aside from a few little boys who immediately perked up like they had been injected with adrenaline, puffing out their chests at the sight of Lin Bei, the other girls basically ignored her, and some even cast expressions of rejection. Gu Junqing understood instantly that this wasn't just because little Lin Bei's popularity at school was truly terrible. It was largely driven by a sense of jealousy. Just like adults, children were equally prone to jealousy, and their envious impulses tended to be even more intense and peculiar. Take someone like Lin Bei, whose beauty could be said to leave her peers in the dust. If she didn't care about interpersonal relationships either, being ostracized was practically a given. Furthermore, the school Lin Xue enrolled Lin Bei in was by no means a poor one. The children inside were either wealthy or noble, and most acted like little tyrants at home. Before their core values were fully formed, this psychological rejection of someone superior to them became even more severe. Gu Junqing didn't dwell on it too much. Exceptional people were always destined to be lonely. Just like himself, people always speculated about his motives with the worst possible malice, completely unaware that he was a righteous gentleman who wanted to lend a helping hand whenever he saw a troubled woman. "Ah, the teacher is here. Hello there, Teacher Wang." "Teacher Wang, thank you for always taking such good care of the child." Gu Junqing lowered his voice and asked Lin Bei, "Who is this?" Casting a glance over, Lin Bei flatly replied, "Teacher Wang, our head teacher. She always targets me." Chapter 1249. Gu Junqing lowered his voice and asked Lin Bei, "Who is this?" Glancing over, Lin Bei flatly replied, "Teacher Wang, our head teacher. She always targets me." Just as her voice fell, Teacher Wang spotted the two of them. She first cast a complex look at Lin Bei, then her gaze immediately snapped to Gu Junqing's face, slightly startling her. Her mood suddenly cleared up significantly. No wonder Lin Bei was so cute, looking like a porcelain-crafted little princess even when she never wore a pleasant expression. It turned out her family members were this handsome too. Teacher Wang subconsciously tidied up her attire, then hurried forward. "Are you Lin Bei's parent?" I'm her uncle," Gu Junqing nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. From Lin Bei's words, it wasn't hard for him to guess this teacher's attitude toward Lin Bei. It was clearly not very good. Furthermore, as the younger sister of the god of war, Yang Chen, Lin Bei naturally held the role of driving the plot development of the god of war's triumphant return. Gu Junqing estimated this likely involved matters at Lin Bei's school. However, from Lin Bei's tone, he didn't detect too much actual hatred. It seemed more like a feeling of neither liking nor hating. "Let's chat over to the side for a moment." After a brief hesitation, Teacher Wang invited Gu Junqing and Lin Bei out to the corridor outside the classroom. "Lin Bei's parent, I know you are busy with work, but how on earth do you parent? Lin Bei has been enrolled for a year and is already in 2nd grade, yet this is the first time I've ever seen you. I heard that when she first enrolled, Lin Bei came to register and pay for her books all by herself. I've called you many times to invite you over, but every time you just send your domestic servants instead." Teacher Wang spoke earnestly, putting on an act of standing up for Lin Bei. Anyone who didn't know better would think she cared deeply about Lin Bei. Seeing this old hag put on such an act, Lin Bei couldn't help pouting as she sneered inwardly. Usually, this teacher Wang constantly made things difficult for her over all sorts of reasons. Lin Xue didn't have time to manage Lin Bei's matters at school, and Lin mother cared even less. Add to that the fact that Lin Bei wasn't the type to run home and complain whenever she felt wronged. After facing no repercussions once or twice, the teacher grew even more uninhibited. One could say that teacher Wang played an indispensable role in making Lin Bei so unpopular in class. Gu Junqing pondered for a moment without speaking. Although he sensed that this teacher Wang was certainly shady, he didn't want to move against her just yet without fully understanding the situation. After all, the Lin family's attitude toward Lin Bei was indeed pretty much as teacher Wang described. Basically, they just provided food and drinks and left her be. She was a child of only 7 or 8 years old, going to school and registering all by herself. It was no wonder Lin Bei developed her current personality. I don't know how you educate your children, but Lin Bei's relationships among her classmates are also poor. If this keeps up, her psychological health will run into trouble. In fact, according to her classmates, her psychological health might already have issues, so you as a parent must care for her more. Glancing at Lin Bei and noticing she wasn't paying attention to her, teacher Wang quickly lowered her voice. Able to teach at this elementary school, she could naturally tell that Gu Junqing's attire was exceptionally expensive. This was definitely a figure she couldn't afford to offend. Therefore, she was somewhat afraid that Lin Bei might complain to Gu Junqing about her. Stealing her heart, she could only claim in advance that Lin Bei had mental issues and suffered from some kind of persecution complex. Some classmates said that. Is someone bullying Lin Bei? Gu Junqing furrowed his brows slightly. As the person closest to the protagonist, suffering some grievances, torture, or bullying before the protagonist rose to power was nothing out of the ordinary. Therefore, Gu Junqing felt a bit concerned. Teacher Wang let out a wry smile, not daring to conceal anything. You're overthinking it. Who would dare bully her? I'd burn incense of gratitude if she didn't bully others, though most of the class really is isolating her. Chapter 1250. You're overthinking it. Who would dare bully her? I'd burn incense of gratitude if she didn't bully others, though most of the class really is isolating her. Teacher Wang let out a wry smile, not daring to conceal anything at this point. In the past, she had simply assumed Lin Bei had no one backing her up. In a class where everyone was either wealthy or noble, Lin Bei alone stood out far too much. Thus, whenever something happened in class, such as a child losing an item, she would subconsciously suspect Lin Bei, or assign her extra chores like cleaning up. Even she herself didn't know why she targeted this child so much. Since teacher Wang knew, why didn't you talk to the child's parents? Gu Junqing said expressionlessly, his bright teeth and flashing cold gaze making him look extremely displeased. I mentioned it at the beginning, but no one in the family cared. Later on, I also. For some reason, a surge of chilliness rose in teacher Wang's heart, and she spoke tremblingly under Gu Junqing's piercing gaze. All right, I get it. This is my phone number. You can contact me if anything comes up. I hope teacher Wang won't make this kind of mistake again. Consider yourself warned. Gu Junqing casually handed over a business card and, after giving that instruction, led Lin Bei, who had been standing alone nearby, into the classroom. He didn't make things difficult for teacher Wang. From her attire and speech, it was clear she didn't come from a wealthy background, so how could she dare manage these wealthy young masters and misses? Being able to notify the parents was already considered decent. In this school, wealth and connections were far more useful than education. Teacher Wang took the business card. The card was very simple, crafted from exquisite white paper, with the golden stamped name Gu Junqing right in the center. Beneath it was a single line containing a phone number. Although teacher Wang didn't know the exact value of this business card, having the contact information of someone who was clearly a big shot made her trip to teach here entirely worthwhile. Just as Gu Junqing and Lin Bei sat down at her desk, Lin Bei eagerly asked, "What did you just say to her?" Lin Bei had just been sent away by Gu Junqing and didn't know what he and teacher Wang had specifically chatted about, but she could be certain that it definitely had to do with her. Looking at this little face, a child only 7 or 8 years old subjected to so much unfair treatment, Gu Junqing felt some pity, though not an overwhelming amount. There were simply too many unfair things in this world, and at the very least, it was already impressive that Lin Bei had managed to grow up safely to this age in the Lin family. After all, Lin Bei's own biological brother could ruthlessly abandon a newborn infant and leave her tossed into the Lin family for 5 years. I just said to take good care of you from now on and stop giving you a hard time. Gu Junqing had no intention of hiding his credit and said calmly, "What does giving a hard time mean?" Lin Bei tilted her head with a half-understanding look and gazed curiously at Gu Junqing. "It means she won't target you anymore. Have you ever told your mom about what happens at school?" Gu Junqing casually explained before asking another question. Although Lin Xue and Lin Bei were technically just sisters in terms of relationship, he knew Lin Bei always viewed Lin Xue as a mother figure. Lin Bei stared at Gu Junqing with her pitch-black, crystal grape-like eyes for a long while before finally uttering a single no. She understood the reason why Gu Junqing had looked so angry just a moment ago. Could there really be someone in this world besides Lin Xue who cared about her, and not for any ulterior motive? This realization left Lin Bei somewhat dazed. To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.